Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all tonight. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for those at home watching remotely. If you hadn't noticed already, we're missing two physically able-bodied board members. We have two out of town and or otherwise not able to join us, so we have them remotely, and we'll be able to participate, hopefully, if technology is good to us tonight, we'll be able to have them participate. But the rest of us are here, and we'll continue the business as normal. So Nikki, would you please call roll?
Ms. Davis.
Here.
Ms. Hill.
Here.
Mrs. Hopper.
Here.
Mr. Schindler.
Here.
Dr. Ciartino.
Here.
Mr. Seltzer.
Here.
Mr. Todd.
I am here. We have no closed session tonight. So we also have no special recognitions, which is unusual. So we will proceed with additions, corrections, and or modifications. Those include 7.01, addition of agenda item 10.26, approval of corporate partnership, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Select Properties, and 7.02, addendum to agenda item 11.07, approval of personnel items. Next up, we will have public comments. It is at this time that we provide an opportunity for citizen comments in an effort to maintain an open and respectful dialogue with our community. The public comment session is not the appropriate forum for addressing individually identifiable student and or personnel matters. Therefore, due to privacy laws protecting students and employees, comments about these matters should not include personally identifiable information or about particular students or employees. Members of the public, staff, and students are encouraged to utilize established policies and procedures for offering suggestions or addressing concerns and complaints prior to bringing the issue before the board. Please be mindful that the meetings of the board, including your statements at the podium, are broadcast and that you are responsible for any public comments you make. In lieu of a public statement, you may choose to submit your comments to the board in writing. Also, due to time constraints and the need to complete the primary responsibilities of our meeting agenda, we cannot respond during the meeting, so you will receive a response from us in writing. We are always available to have an open dialogue outside of our meetings and can be reached by email or phone using the contact information on the Parkway website. Tonight, I believe we have 7 speakers, and so that means we will be able to allot 3 minutes for each speaker. I will call on the speakers in order in which they have signed up. Before you speak, please state your name and your relationship or affiliation to or with Parkway. So first up, we have Liam Brownell.
Hello, my name is Liam Brownell. I'm a 7th grader at West Middle School in the Mosaics Academy. Please do not move the academy from West to South Middle. Just like many of my peers, I am twice exceptional. I have a high IQ, but that does not mean I am good at everything. My non-academy teachers get that. They understand me. They understand my peers. The teachers at South don't know us, and they don't know how the academy works. Sure, they could learn, but we don't have time for that. I know I am not going to be moving to South, but I worry about future academy kids and their experiences. If you decide to move the academy, that means I will have to do virtual learning for at least part of my day. That will cause me lots of unneeded anxiety and won't be good for me and many of my peers. I need my teachers in person teaching me every day, both of them. I also want to point out that if we were to have to do virtual, we won't be learning in the way that we should. The lack of diversity in the learning materials by splitting 1 week of all science and math and then the next week of all ELA and social studies is not a good way to learn. The last thing I want to say today is that if you're going to make us wear masks, you need to make everyone wear them correctly. If everyone isn't wearing them correctly, then we shouldn't wear them at all. In one of my classes the other day, there were 12 kids not wearing their masks correctly. Of those 12, 3 didn't have one on at all. Almost one half of the students were not following the rules. The person in charge didn't do anything about it. I got my vaccine like I was supposed to, and it's not fair I still have to wear a mask.
Thank you, Liam. Next up, we have Yvette Lothan.
Good evening, board members and administration. My name is Dr. Yvette Lothan. I have children at both Piermont and West High School. I am here to discuss the proposal to change Piermont's feeder pattern to South Middle and then West High School. First, thank you for your service. Parkway is large, and after attending many meetings, I can appreciate that there are many issues and much data to consider. Thank you, Mr. Todd, for taking the time to reply to my public comments. I do want to clarify that a parent choosing to move a child between schools in order to attend an elite program is in no way similar or comparable to the current proposal. A parent's choice is different and distinguishable from the current proposal of establishing the school feeder pattern for Piermont kids to be going from South District's middle school to West High School. Kids change schools and friends get split up. It happens. However, making that the official Parkway plan for all Piermont kids is sad. We can do better for our kids. I am willing to work with you, and many of us parents here are very willing to work with you to find a better solution. In 2016, when Henry had increasing enrollment, moving Henry to South Middle was discussed and emphatically rejected. Of note, Piermont and Henry elementary schools are both 1.2 miles from South Middle. Both elementary schools span Highway 141. Instead, $2.6 million was spent on the Henry expansion. If redistricting is such a big deal, why is it a good solution as long as we're talking about Piermont? If crowding in middle schools is a problem, and we keep hearing it, will we see it on the ballot soon to build more additions? What about building a second middle school for the West District? South has 2. According to Parkway's 2002 study, enrollment has been the same since 2002. During the years before, 1995 to 2001, enrollment was higher than it is now. A particular comment from this district-wide study was that elementary families prefer not to split. Also from this study, realigning the school feeder patterns was considered but never implemented because it did not solve the issues of the time and it created many concerns. Over the last several months, we've been voicing those same concerns. There's still a concern today, including the psychological effects of having kids change schools from middle to high school. Thank you for your time and for seriously considering all ramifications of this proposal. I am including copies for each of you.
Thank you, Dr. Lothan. Next up is Mary Brownell.
Hi, my name is Mary Brownell. I am the parent of a Mosaic Academy student, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to you again. I'm sure you're tired of hearing from me. I don't need to repeat my previous points, but I do want to make a few additional points tonight. Virtual learning in a pandemic is an emergency situation. Having students learn virtually for a school district's convenience is unacceptable. If COVID had never happened, the virtual learning would not even be a conversation we are having about the Mosaic Academy. Yes, some kids learn that way, but many do not. In fact, every student in the Mosaic Academy picked in-person learning this school year. There is a reason for that. I would also like to explain that my concerns have absolutely nothing to do with South Middle School. I believe it's a great school. I believe there are great people and great educators in that building, just as I believe that about every Parkway school. It's not about the building. It's not about the staff. It's about what is best for kids in this program, this very unique program that this district has that no other school district anywhere in the state of Missouri has. We're special, and that's amazing, and we're here because of that. Please keep the Hvac Academy where it is. The students, the teachers, and the staff all know how to work with our students who are unique in every way, and your support in that is appreciated. I would also just to likely briefly talk about my point my son made about masks. We need to either wear them correctly or not make them mandatory. I know there are many opinions about masks, and I'm not going to get into that tonight because that's not what I'm here to discuss. What I'm here to discuss is that we need to either wear our masks and wear them the right way, or we need to make them optional. We can't have exceptions to that rule. When I have a child who is very rule following, when they come home and they're upset that some people are doing it, some people are not, it's a very difficult conversation to have with them. So if we're going to enforce it, let's enforce it, or let's make it optional. And that's all I have to say about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Brownell. Next up, we have Douglas Stockenberg. Douglas Stockenberg.
Good evening. I'd originally planned to come here tonight to advocate once again for student choice regarding wearing these worthless medical devices we call masks, among other related Parkway policies currently affecting Parkway students. However, by speaking out on these important matters negatively affecting my children's mental health and physical well-being, I now risk being branded a domestic terrorist by certain elements currently in the federal government. Thus, I wanted to take a step back tonight and address this disturbing effort to chill free speech and silence parents who choose to exercise their constitutionally protected right to advocate on behalf of their children on matters that are vitally important to them, including their physical and mental welfare while at school. The framers of our Constitution very intentionally placed the right to free speech and the right to petition their government for a redress of grievances as the first among those cherished freedoms enumerated in the Bill of Rights, because without these vital rights, the others simply won't matter. However, when the federal government threatens to brand parents who speak out on behalf of their children as domestic terrorists, and it also weaponizes the FBI and other federal resources to silence concerned parents, that is extremely alarming in a free society. Just to be clear, I certainly condemn any real threats of violence against any school official. Everyone does. That is absolutely illegal and wrong. However, the warning issued by the federal government went far beyond illegal threats of violence and also warned against harassment and intimidation by parents. Now, these terms are extremely vague, especially when used in this hyper-politicized context. Thus, the federal government's warning can easily be twisted by law enforcement and others in an effort to silence parents with differing viewpoints on these highly sensitive matters. Thus, this warning clearly crossed the line by attempting to chill constitutionally protected free speech, and it is unconstitutional and illegal. Well, I'm here to say that I and other concerned parents will not be intimidated by these Orwellian strong-arm tactics, which are not only illegal under the First Amendment, but also a personal affront to the sacred duty of parents to peacefully advocate on behalf of their children. Now, with my remaining additional time, I call upon the Parkway Board of Education to hold a special meeting, an open forum for parents to come and express their concerns about Parkway's mask policy and the quarantine policies. Having 2 minutes or 3 minutes tonight to speak at these Board of Education meetings and otherwise writing letters simply is not an adequate way to address these vitally important matters. So again, I really encourage the Parkway Board of Education to hold a special meeting, an interactive one, where parents can come, express their concerns, and hopefully have some interaction back from the Parkway Board of Education as to the justification for these policies and when they're going to be revisited. The numbers are changing. It's time for Parkway to make some decisions to change these policies. Thank you.
Up we have Rebecca Thomas.
My name is Rebecca Thomas. I have children at Piermont Elementary. Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the board. Thank you for your time this evening. I have previously spoke at meetings and I'm speaking again tonight related to the Piermont boundary issue. It has been brought to my attention that a similar issue was raised in 2002 by the community regarding space and enrollment issues. At that time, the board decided to assemble a committee of members from the community representing each school in the district to confront Parkway's space and enrollment issues. Each school was given the opportunity to have at least one representative from the community. The board provided the community objectives to address as part of this. As a result, an 85-page report was delivered. In the end, there was an analysis of each school and recommendations provided. That's what Yvette mentioned earlier. At the time of this report, West Middle had 1,248 students enrolled. West Middle currently has 100 students less now than in 2002. The overall committee view stated, boundary lines have remained static for many years while significant changes have occurred in school operations and population patterns. A patchwork approach is not good enough. This is the time is at hand for district-wide action to address space and enrollment issues. To me, this is still fundamentally the concern for the Parkway district. There are space and enrollment issues throughout the district, and Parkway is implementing patchwork fixes or Band-Aids. This is at the expense of our children. They deserve better. To my knowledge, there has been no independent flow study or community committee that has had input into this proposal. I don't understand how we can ask the board to approve a proposal without community input and without a thorough analysis by a third party. At the last board meeting, I listened for over an hour to a presentation about the SRO program and feedback on how to improve this program. There was a long study performed with surveys answered from members of the community, teachers, parents, etc. And I repeat, to my knowledge, none of this has been performed for this boundary issue. No community member has received a survey to provide feedback on this from all the schools in the Parkway district. I leave you with two thoughts to consider and ask you to put yourself in the shoes of a Piermont boundary resident. If you're a parent with children, how do you explain to your child that they go to middle school and then change to a different high school to separate from relationships they have developed in the middle school? Secondly, if you're a homeowner trying to sell your home, and the reason why your home won't sell is because the buyers provide feedback that they don't like the fact that Piermont has a different feeder pattern than all the other Parkway schools, and this makes their child be considered an outsider. The parents of Piermont feel like we are considered outsiders in this process, and we are not giving a voice to voice our opinion. Thank you. And I provided the 85-page paper in case you don't have it.
Tiffany Miranda?
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Miranda, and I have 3 children at Piermont Elementary. I have addressed the board several times with concerns about the boundary change proposal that I share with many Piermont parents and community members. I'm here again to ask several questions I want the board to consider when evaluating this proposal. First, why is this change being explored in the middle of a global pandemic? Nothing is typical at any school right now. Space is used in unusual ways at all campuses. Programs have been adjusted, and students' social maturity has been slowed due to the lack of normal social interactions. All of this impacts the feeling of space in a school. Decisions that have such a critical and lasting impact on one student group shouldn't be made under these circumstances. West Middle has operated successfully for many years, and evaluation and making of this change during a pandemic just isn't appropriate. Second, where is the research? Becky spoke about it a moment ago, but every document we've been provided is outdated and inconclusive or erroneous. Why hasn't the district contracted an appropriate flow study or had campuses with large student populations reviewed for appropriate space usage? No one expects the administration to be experts on these areas, but we do expect that the experts are consulted before such a dramatic change is implemented. How could you possibly know this is a proper and sustainable solution without these studies? Third, why is the administration in such a hurry to push this through? I understand they want it voted on before the end of the year so it can be implemented during the next school year, but enrollment is flat and not anticipated to increase. This keeps being sold as a gradual or phased process. However, for Piermont students and all Piermont students, it's immediate. Current 5th graders who are preparing to attend West Middle next year will immediately be redirected to South. There's nothing gradual or phased about this proposal for them. Please pass on this proposal in its current form and take the appropriate time to make sure that any decision that is made regarding boundary changes is equitable and sustainable. As a community, we're relying on you to get this right for all students, which includes students at Piermont Elementary. Thank you.
Miranda. Next up, we have Wayne Hartman. Wayne Hartman, there you are.
Some of the most highly educated individuals say wrong things and have the worst ideas that are not thought through. The idea of Piermont. To the board, these people put you in those chairs as their voice. You know exactly what they want. I hope when you vote next month, it follows their voice. Superintendent Marty, in your second email to the community on 9/28, the media, radio, and TV reported the student responsible is non-white. That was a moronic statement for you to make as head of this school district. You put all students in harm's way. If you don't understand why, call me and I'll explain that to you. Your email said you've been working on this for years to help students understand the views. If you have, you failed. What practices are these teachers implementing? Are you trying to be a tough guy, saying that the student will be met with substantial disciplinary and potential legal consequences? You say you acknowledge and laundered praise on the student's efforts. In reality, you lost control of the entire situation and used that phrase as a cover. For the student, this could be a crying for help on his part. You should have said the student has been identified and will be dealt with accordingly, period. Now the public doesn't know the race or the gender. That can keep all students safer, even the person who made the comments. To the board, at the 9/29 meeting, an hour-plus long presentation of questions asked about the school resource officers, you, the board, wanted answers broke down between black and white. Why? As soon as I heard that, two immediate questions popped into my head. I spoke with Paul Tandy the next day on the phone and said because race was brought into this, my two questions, which I explained to him and should have been part of that, he agreed with. According to Marty, there are a lot of different cultures and backgrounds in this district, and you, the board, picked black and white. You all say you want to take race problems out, but this board, by doing that, you stoke the flame to keep it hot. Actions speak louder than words. Marty says there's many different cultures and backgrounds, and you, the board, did not want to include any of them, telling them that they do not matter. Yes, you did that. Parents stand here and say they don't get emails or calls back. That is a number one, communication. But one board member did admit that he can do better. That's like saying, my bad, and I hate that phrase. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, let's see, that was our last speaker for this evening. So, next, may I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education as scheduled for October 13th, 2021?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. The next regular board meeting will take place on Wednesday, November 17th, 2021, beginning at 7 p.m. right here at the Parkway Welcome Center. Next up, we have board and superintendent reports. We haven't had a whole lot of time since our last board meeting, but we'll run down the line and see if anyone has anything to share.
I'll share one thing, just the mere fact that I do think we're doing a very good job with the COVID protocols we have in place right now. I've been impressed by the numbers being low to the start of this fall semester. I think we're doing a pretty good job. Seeing other districts adding the mask back in now when it was optional. We are doing some right things right now. And if the community does have the virus lessen, we will adjust our protocols going forward too. But for right now, I'm impressed by the students at events, at a choir concert last night. We were all masked up. It was nice. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. And I think the students are very glad to be back in school. And I'm glad we're keeping more kids in school by avoiding the extra quarantines if we did have a mask optional policy.
As a parent, I participated in parent-teacher conferences for both of my kids in the past couple of weeks. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because they were virtual. It's nicer to meet people in person, but I did really appreciate the convenience of the virtual conferences. And one thing I'd like to have us look into is maybe look at the participation numbers and see if having conferences virtually is increasing parent participation over in-person conferences, because everybody's got different needs. And I was lucky enough that my conferences were mostly good, and the teachers were great about explaining specific things they noticed about my kids, and so they were a really good experience. But I think it's worth looking into that virtual versus in-person. I know that you can never please everybody, but the flexibility was really, really nice. I also just want to say I've been to 2 band competitions in the past couple weeks, and I have to give a shout out. Parkway West did well, but I have to say that Parkway North at the competition in Potosi last week came in 3rd out of 19 bands. And their performance is just fabulous. It's all Latin American and marimba type music, and it's just wonderful. They took 3rd place and they won 2 of their caption prizes, which are kind of the specialty prizes. West did well, but North really knocked it out of the park at that competition, and so that was fun to see.
I do not have anything since our last meeting.
Last week, I I had an experience I enjoy the most. I was invited to speak to 2nd grade students at Mason Ridge, 2 classes, and they wanted to know about the board. Why do we have a board? How are you elected to the board as a board member, et cetera, et cetera. They had dozens of questions. But anyway, it was a delightful experience to talk to students, listen to students, and see their excitement and enjoyment, and just being able to ask questions and learn. And it was something I enjoyed most, as I said before.
Thank you. Do either of you have any comments you can share about the Equity Task Force that met a couple weeks ago?
Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned it at the last meeting, and I said it was the next day.
It was.
So good job. Jeff knows my schedule better than me. Sam and I had a meeting of the Equity Task Force the day after our last board meeting. It was mostly a recap for all the people that participated that in the first place of what we've gone over, the recommendations we had made, updating the committee on the fact that the board had received those recommendations, and on plans that were starting to be implemented across the district. So,
Great.
thanks.
I echo that.
And I really don't have a whole lot to add. I did get to a football game last week, and that was pretty exciting. But I will pass on to Dr. Marty, see if he has any remarks.
Sure, just a few comments too. I had the pleasure today, along with Dr. Matheson, to do some work over lunch hour at the food pantry. And I think it's just a good reminder to our community. We worked hard. We had a steady flow of folks that were arriving, and a number of volunteers, a number of staff members who continue to support the food pantry. And I just want to say that we are working to try to sustain and improve the food pantry, sustain it. We have a lot of families now that are really counting on the food pantry as in this time of stress and time of need. And I'm proud that Dr. Matheson is working with an advisory group, and we're looking to see if we can potentially sustain through partnerships or through ongoing work with our religious leaders and community members, and to make sure we are taking care of the needs of our community, but also being able to sustain it without a lot of pressure on any individual. So again, had a great day, and I know very, very proud of the district's efforts here to take care of our families. Looking forward to another group that's really active in Parkway is our Parkway Alumni Association. They have their annual golf outing. I'm excited to be golfing with Sam and Kevin Seltzer on the 23rd at Forest Park. It's a money maker, a money raiser, and several of the team here will be also participating, along with many of alumni. So the Parkway Alumni Association is also going through some planning, looking at their future. Dr. Beckner is going to be facilitating that work in the next several months to a year. I just want to echo, I've been able to get out and attend some football games, some other activities, and it's really been a pleasure. I think all our homecomings are now complete. We were able to complete in a healthy way those activities, and thanks again to the compliance of our students and our staff. We've been having a really fine fall season of athletics, but other events. Pam talked about music, and we're pretty excited about being able to have those resumed, and it's been really a wonderful season, and we're looking forward to that continued into the winter season, not only sports but other activities in Parkway. Just want to take a moment. I have the pleasure occasionally to be able to mentor graduate students at various universities, and I want to just introduce a gentleman who's visiting tonight, Dan. We just waved, Dan Lanier, who's an art teacher in the district at South and West Middle, South High School. And Dan and I met today. He's going to be, he's working on his doctorate at Maryville in administration, and it's my pleasure to be able to spend some time and get to know him. We're really trying, I know a number of my team, and Jeff Todd was even interviewed tonight by a graduate student, are really always trying to enhance leadership development, and that's one thing that we can do is help mentor and develop leadership. And then finally, I just want to respond to the comment made by Mr. Stockenberg about First Amendment. One of the things that I'm very, very proud of, and I think I speak for the board at our meetings, is that, and thanks to all of you, we want to have discussion. We want to hear your views, and I too do not want to see us have to not abide by, as a former government teacher, someone who really believes in the Constitution, we do want to enhance First Amendment rights, and we want to have this discussion. So I certainly think it's important that we be able to continue in civil discourse, and I think I just salute all of you. We've had a wonderful ability to do that here in Parkway. That hasn't always been true in other agencies and other government bodies around the country, but I'm very, very proud of our ability to do that here in Parkway, for people to feel free to express their views, and whether they're young people or whether parents or others, we really appreciate it as administration and board, and we do not want to quelch it. We want to certainly enhance it. So, Mr. Stockenberg and anybody else who has those concerns, we want to maintain that. It's certainly a right in this country, and we don't want to lose that. So, thank you.
And I need to apologize to two board members who I didn't even go to because they're not sitting here, but they're here. So Kevin and Debbie, I apologize. I skipped right over you in our board reports. So Kevin, why don't you go ahead and share anything you'd like to, and then Debbie, you can follow Kevin.
Apology accepted, Jeff. I don't know how great the connection is and how easy it is to hear us, but in any event, I'll stay brief. Among other experiences this month, right now is the experience I want to talk about. I'm out of town at a conference, and Parkway's IT team would not allow that to get in the way of me attending a board meeting. I just want to let it be known how much I appreciate their efforts. They're like a lot of the parts of Parkway. They do their jobs and allow for Debbie and I to take part in this. I just wouldn't want that to go unnoticed. So thank you for allowing this to happen. Debbie?
No, I agree. I don't have any other comments to make, but thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Next up, we have our consent agenda. We have a fairly healthy consent agenda, which the board has reviewed over the last week. And so now may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the October 13th, 2021 board materials?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Okay. Is there anything to be pulled to action or closed? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. We have no action items. We have no policy review this meeting. So next up is the first of two work sessions. This one is the Facilities and Sustainability Preliminary Work Session. So I'd like to invite Dr. Nathan Tyson, Director of Data Management and Research, and Mrs. Patty Bedborough, our Chief Financial Officer, to join us for the work session.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the Board of Education. Tonight, both Dr. Tyson and I will be providing an overview of the preliminary work that both Ralph Neese, our Director of Facilities, and Hannah Carter, our Sustainability Coordinator, have developed so far for their targeted program evaluation. This was scheduled to be done last year, but because of the COVID and our shutdown, et cetera, this was delayed until this year. Doesn't mean it wasn't important. So first, an overview of the Facilities Department. So our Facilities Department is made up of a Grounds Department, Maintenance, Planning and Construction, Custodial, Warehouse, and then Safety and Environmental Services. We have a total of 264, we say employees, but positions, because we do have several openings, both in our grounds and our maintenance positions. As we get into some of the questions, one of the departments that we're doing a deep dive into is the HVAC department, but I just want to make note that currently that department has 10 positions, a lead position, a licensed positions, and then 8 technicians. Currently, we have 4 openings in that area as well. So that is part of our struggle that we currently are facing. In our sustainability department, as you know, we used to be led by a director, which is Eric Leaders. He led both sustainability and purchasing. He recently left the district, but we do still have Hannah Carter, which is our coordinator of sustainability, and then Nick Geigler, which he performs a lot of the LED light fixture changes throughout the district as well. So part of their job is looking at energy efficiency projects, rebate incentives, student and staff engagement, which you'll see one of the focuses tonight to do a deeper dive into that, along with our curricular integration, our utility tracking and analysis tools, and then waste management like recycling, composting, landfill, and shredding. As you know, we have 6 schools that have been individually recognized as green ribbon schools from the U.S. Department of Education. We also are a district that has been recognized as a green ribbon district, not only by the U.S. Department of Ed, but of course through Missouri as well. So certainly our sustainability efforts have been very deep and rooted in Parkway history. When we look at our timeline, our recommended timeline for this targeted program review, they began in September with identifying the possible topics. We are here tonight to present the questions that they are going to do the deep dive in, so guiding their work. In November through February, they're going to conduct the program evaluation along with the assistance of Dr. Tyson. And then February through March, develop those preliminary findings with, their planning team, et cetera. And then April, develop that summary draft. I'll review it with them. And then hopefully to have a final report to you in the month of June. So remember, this is a targeted program evaluation, so it ends with a memo/report to the Board of Education. So first, we go with our reason for having this work session tonight, and it is to receive your input and your insight, your guidance on the main topics that have been selected and the guiding questions that have been made for this program evaluation. The team for their planning and review team includes principals and teachers, curriculum coordinators, facilities and sustainability staff, regional school district facility leaders, some of them used to be Parkway employees, and then some industry experts from the Department of Energy, from Train, which is one of our partners, ACES, our automatic controls equipment systems, which is our systems company that we utilize in facilities, and then the U.S. Green Building Council as well. When we look at our main topics that we're going to cover, of course, we start all of our work with mission, vision, and purpose. So how does this tie into our strategic plan? That'll be some of the questions that go through the other 3 topics that we're going to cover as well. So the other topics include the delivery of the HVAC maintenance needs, sustainability in planning and construction, and sustainability learning. So first, sustainability, facilities and sustainability in the mission, vision, and purpose. Mission, vision, and purpose. So to review the facilities and sustainability department's alignment with our district mission, vision, and strategic plan. So when we're looking here, we want, goal 3 of our strategic plan of Project Parkway, of course, is our guiding principles here. So our 2 main questions that we have developed are, how are the facilities and sustainability department's goals and outcomes using district resources, personnel, time, and financial, responsibly, efficiently, and effectively? I guess it should be deployed, right? Second question, in what ways are the facilities and sustainability departments successfully integrating environmentally, socially, and fiscally sustainable practices? So item number 1 ties almost directly into measurable objective 1, and item number 2 ties almost directly into our measurable objective 3. So making sure that when we're putting environmentally responsible projects in place, that they have a fiscal return as well, and they are fiscally sustainable. For the next area, I am actually going to be turning it over to Dr. Tyson.
Thank you, Patty, and good to see you all again. So briefly, I'll just go ahead and continue on. So Patty did a great job covering mission, vision, and purpose. And then we have 3 other main topic areas, and then just some questions underneath each of those. And so remember then at the end of this, if you could, provide any feedback that you have, suggestions for how to go ahead and move forward on the study, if you think maybe there's any kind of oversight in terms of what we want to study, or just anything along those lines, we would love your feedback. All right, so when it comes to HVAC, we have some guiding questions here. I also tried to underline just the main components in each of the guiding questions, just so you can kind of hone into, okay, here is really what we're trying to get at with each of these guiding questions. So very first one under HVAC maintenance, what preventative and comprehensive equipment maintenance processes are in place? So all about maintenance processes, we want to study that. Second one, how are staffing levels and skills evaluated to complete maintenance needs in a timely and effective manner? So that one's all about staffing levels. Third one, what types of training opportunities are available? So that one just all about training opportunities. And then to what extent are external contractors utilized to support maintenance needs? So what about the external contractors? Few other ones. How are current systems? So in facilities, we have Automated Logic, we have Taliesin, we have SchoolDude. These are some of the software programs that are used. How are the current systems that we use utilized and integrated to maximize efficiency? Next one there, what are best practices for determining that HVAC maintenance work is completed based on industry standard timelines? So that one's more of a timeline piece. And then finally for HVAC, how are building HVAC systems operated and maintained efficiently and effectively to responsibly meet the needs of the district? So those are the guiding questions we have when it comes to maintenance with HVAC. Moving on then to sustainability in planning and construction. So with sustainability, this is the piece. How does kind of sustainability tie into the planning and construction? Again, I tried to underline some of the key phrases here. And also some of this tends to get just a touch technical. So I'm going to try to do my best here. But again, as Patty shared, really Ralph and Hannah did a great job kind of working with the planning team to develop these. So first one there is, to what extent are ASHRAE? That's an acronym which really is about the American Society of HVAC, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers. So it's an engineering American society that we have, and then they have some guidelines. So if you're in the business here, that's this 50% advanced energy design guidelines that they're interested in looking at, and how do we integrate these into planning and construction specifications. Number two, how are design plans reviewed to ensure the specifications are met? Third one, how are the ASHRAE Zero Energy Advanced Energy Design Guidelines explored for implementation? Next one, how well are life cycle cost analyses utilized? So looking at the life cycle of some of the HVAC equipment that we have. What is the needs assessment process that we have in place for collecting, analyzing, and prioritizing input from stakeholders? And then how can the data management system be better utilized to document? And then we just have some breakout pieces there, but that's all about the data management system. Just a few more for planning and construction when it comes to sustainability. Are contractors completing documentation for utility rebate incentive processes, including any pre-approvals, energy modeling, design documentation, et cetera? Should we integrate commissioning into future capital replacement projects? So I checked with Hannah on what exactly commissioning is. She said this is when you finish a project and you bring in a third party to kind of go through the project, make sure everything was done as it was supposed to be done, and that the specifications are met. So obviously there's a cost to that, and this question is getting at, should we include commissioning into this process of project delivery and projects? Should we include it in? Is it worth the cost? Next one, what processes are in place to ensure construction and demolition waste is diverted from the landfill as much as possible through recycling and reuse? And then finally, how are energy efficiency, water conservation, and indoor quality best practices prioritized during construction and renovation activities? And then our final main topic is all about sustainability learning. So this one is a little bit closer to home when it comes to curriculum and professional development, some of the topics that we're a little bit more familiar with. So first one here, how are readily accessible outdoor learning environments identified at each school? What are the goals of current student outdoor learning programs? How can we increase student participation in Parkway, local, state, and national sustainability-related events? And then what learning outcomes are tied to these events? Next one, in what ways can we increase professional development opportunities for all teachers around integrating sustainability into their curriculum? And then to what extent is sustainability-related content integrated into curriculum? And then the very last slide here. Where could sustainability-related service learning opportunities and or CTE training be implemented? How can we continue to leverage partnerships within the local community to advance sustainability learning? What trainings on campus and district sustainability initiatives do students and staff receive? And finally, how can we continue to promote and or educate occupants on sustainability initiatives and features in their buildings? So those are, again, it's the targeted review. So wanted to have those three, well, really four if we include the mission main topic area, and then all those guiding questions that we just went through with you all. So I think at this time, Patty, Hannah, Ralph, myself, we're all very open to hearing any of the feedback that you have from this presentation or anything maybe that you think we may have left out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, first off, for that presentation. I didn't see that the presentation in the board docs information. Can we get a copy of that, specifically the timeline slide? Okay, that'd be great. And I'll start off with a question. Patty, you mentioned that we have 6 green ribbon schools. Do we have goals for any other schools to get to that level? And if so, how are those schools identified? What are the goals? Is that something that's going to be part of this review process?
That is an excellent question, and it's an easy answer. So once we obtain the 6 schools, actually Green Ribbon asked for us to put in that application for district-wide. So now we have met the highest level of award possible in that district-wide Green Ribbon. So that put in not only individual school sustainability efforts, so the 3 pillars would be anything that we've done building-wide for energy and indoor air quality, then what we've done for community and culture, so how we have enhanced the health and wellness of that building. So whether it's air quality or even some of our wellness activities, et cetera, including mental health activities. And then the third pillar is everything to do with, like Hannah's last set of questions, how have we integrated sustainability into our curriculum as well? So with that district-wide, we have the not only the bond projects that we have done that have enhanced our energy savings, including our geothermal field at South High, but then district-wide implementation such as our CNG bus fleet that has 52 buses that are powered by compressed natural gas. You know, our solar panels that are on each and every building and on each and every campus as well. So things like that really have earned us the highest standard that we can achieve there.
So in other words, they're not accepting individual school applications anymore, so really, right, Patty?
Not from Parkway.
Yeah, not from Parkway.
They will from others,
Yeah.
so.
But do we have plans for the rest of the Parkway schools to meet the level that those 6 have achieved?
So certainly, that is part of this work too, to make sure that it is, you know, first and foremost throughout the curriculum. When we're looking at the HVAC controls, part of that process is going to be looking at things that, you know, we have in place as far as our setback controls, making sure that the school dude is reporting correctly to the ACES system, and then Taliesin works as this dashboard to kind of give us alerts when things, you know, like a damper is closed or a motor is short cycling, you know, or what have you. So making sure that, you know, we're making that the equipment is working as optimal as possible. And then our other portion of that is, you know, going into that question number 3, which is providing that sustainability backdrop into all of our building planning as well. So as we get further into information leading up to our next bond issue, you will see that a lot of the planning that has come into place is talking about the building envelope. So shoring up, ensuring that we have higher insulation on our roof repairs. We have higher SEER, which is energy savings on our HVAC systems, and then installation of new windows indoors that have greater ceilings. So a thermal window replacing a single pane window where they exist as well. So certainly it is a district-wide. The other measure that we use outside of the green ribbon is also our Energy Star schools as well. So most years, usually 16 to 20 of our schools on average receive that Energy Star rating. Last year, we actually received the Partner of the Year from Energy Star. So that was, once again, a district-wide award, and that was based on our pre-pandemic energy savings. So.
Can you go back to who's on the review group? And what I'm looking to understand is that I feel like half of the study is incredibly technical, and half of it is differently technical. So it's more about, you know, the educational experience related to kids engaging versus, like, is the HVAC system as functional as it could be? So just thinking about the same team of people reviewing and interpreting the findings of the study, I'm going to have to trust the industry experts on how they interpret the HVAC findings. So how do we ensure that we have the right people that don't have conflicts that are looking at those and interpreting it for us, as compared to we have lots of experts on education that can help us understand and interpret those kinds of findings? Does that make
I think
sense?
that is an excellent point. And certainly we could limit the industry experts that participate. That's an excellent point. The same thing, I would say that I challenge them, instead of having regional district facilities leaders that have experience in Parkway, my challenge was those that don't have experience in Parkway, and such too, because I think then you get an outside view.
It just helps. You just, but I don't think I'm I don't think I'm opposed to more industry experts because we need more people that aren't people like us to look at that kind of technical information. And at the same time, just making sure that they're not also people that would stand to benefit if they are like, no, you do need to change to XYZ system. So just getting that balance right.
So perhaps more from the U.S. Green Building Council and Department of Energy and less from a vendor per se.
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, do others? Okay.
I'd agree with that.
Excellent.
I'll just say I'm very encouraged to see the outdoor learning experiences on the list. Through my work, I get a chance to visit a lot of outdoor educational areas, and I would love to see more of those come to Parkway, so that's great to see up there.
Awesome.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Debbie, go ahead.
Can you hear me? So we talked a lot I got a couple of questions for you. At the beginning of COVID, we talked a lot about air quality and trying to help mitigate the spread of COVID through the HVA system. Is that something that's still on the list of things to ensure that the different types of filters that are necessary to install throughout the district to ensure high air quality is going to be taking place in a routine fashion?
So certainly we can add that as one of the questions, but I do know that that is one of the focus of using some of our federal stimulus money is we are looking into purchasing additional MERV 11 and MERV 13 filters. So Ralph was checking on that today to see where that order process is, because of course we have supply and demand issues, and then also the installation of air purification systems. So we have 3 systems that are currently under study. I believe the 3rd system was just recently received, and they are confirming the installation of that. So once we have some data supporting the impact of the air purification systems that have been installed, then the district will move to that purchase of those systems for district-wide use.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But we can
The
add
other-
some air purification questions to the HVAC for sure.
Okay. The other thing that I observed when I was doing a lot of the school tours is on the interior of the building. And some of our buildings are rather old, and so it appears as though there looks to be like there might be older equipment that's maybe not being utilized, or maybe it is, and it just looks old. Like radiators and pipes and stacks that, particularly at West Middle, there was one that I pointed out to Dr. Miller. I was like, what is going on with this thing? And she's like, we never noticed that before. Like, it just looks dirty and nasty. And so I'm wondering, just as you go through buildings, is somebody looking at things like that to see, is there equipment or things that are not being used, if not being used at all, that maybe it just needs to be removed, or some attention to maybe how it looks, or could some attention could be made to things like that.
Wonderful. We'll put that on the list.
On the construction front, this may be out of the purview of the scope of this conversation. Is there anything that can be done to reassess or readdress change orders and how in construction processes? It just seems to me, I know that there's been some changes in how the board receives that information, but it seems like there have been a lot of change orders, and I don't, is there something that could be done up front ahead of time to relook at plans and architectural design, things of that nature, to get a double look, a triple look, to make sure that these change orders are minimized? Because we know that every time there's a change order, there's an expense involved and a delay sometimes in finishing construction projects.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. You should notice in the future, majority of our projects now are under the deployment of the CMAR, so Construction Manager at Risk. The two big projects that you mentioned with large change orders were both this project here at the Welcome Center and our McKelvey Primary. Both of them, had well over 10% in change orders for us. And, unfortunately, we had to do the work that was mandated on there. Under the CMAR platform, we hire that construction manager at risk to work from the beginning with the architects and the design team to ensure the constructability of the planning and the design. So hopefully when the whole theory behind it is when it comes time to construct it, that they're able to construct it for the cost that is included in the contract. So there is I will say there is a cushion that is put in the contract for some change orders, but the construction manager is at risk for anything above that amount. We are refunded anything under that amount. So last year you saw a great deal of change orders. This year, those should be, essentially minimized. So we have a 3% that we have as a cushion on top of that contract, that just in case we are in a job and there is something that we, the owner, want to choose to have done while they're, they assess and they find a problem. We want that completed while that construction company is there. So we do have that as a an item, that a contingency that is pre-approved. But other than that, you should not see large change orders at all under that CMAR. So McCarthy is currently our partner for construction manager at risk.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, and again, this may be out of the scope of this conversation, and if it is, just let me know. We talked about this offline, but it might be worthy to discuss this publicly, but so one of the new mandates in our construction process has to do with storm shelters, and having, anytime a new building is constructed or an expansion is made on a building, a storm shelter has to be created and built. Can you, and if it's out of the scope of tonight's discussion, I understand, but I don't know if this should be part of this discussion and more to talk about how this becomes a barrier or constraint to what the district might want to do, because I'm still perplexed as to how lesser financially stable districts around our state, or if this is even a federal or whether it's a federal, a state, or a local mandate, how districts are going to be able to afford to build a storm shelter every time they want to expand on the building or build another building, because they're very expensive.
I think that is an excellent topic. I don't know that it applies to this. However, we could add that as part of our subtopic for our upcoming board workshop in December, where we're already talking about a lot of planning, because I know James Swingle and Ralph and their team have worked in some of that in some of our upcoming projects that we're looking into as well. So it is an international building code from 2015 that locally St. Louis County now has put into place. So it has implications certainly for us, but as you mentioned, for anybody that is building an educational space, and it's over so many square foot, that now becomes a trigger, if you will, to have that storm shelter secure portion of the building in any educational space.
Public or private, right?
So I don't know
Is it
about
only
private.
public schools or private schools are affected too?
Well, I know this part of the code that's impacted us is based on educational space. So I know this part applies directly to schools. They may know the answer to the other part, and I don't want to misspeak at all.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Patty, I just had a thought that came to me tonight as I was, the last point about getting student engagement and part of the curriculum. I just wonder if we already have in essence a model, because when we started the geothermal project at South High School, there was a lot of teacher and student involvement. We made, I participated, and a lot of teachers, Dr. Beckner and some of his coordinators. So I just wonder if there could be part of that to be kind of a model of what has already taken place that we could build on.
Oh, and I will say Hannah has worked very closely with the curriculum coordinators, including Jen, AA with the elementary, and the project Lead the Way for the elementary teams as well. So she is very, I will say joined at the hip with her and Stephanie and Jennifer Prophet as well. So that was a beginning of a connection, but they have certainly worked very closely together over these last 2 years to ensure, and get a lot of I'm going to say project-based learning, but I'm using the wrong terms, but getting some lesson plans and development into the curriculum for teachers, to have go-to material to be able to utilize.
I'll ask one more follow-up question to the green ribbon thing that I mentioned earlier. I know a lot of industries and companies have announced over the past few years that they have a goal of reducing emissions by 2030 or 2040 or what have you. Do we have any goals to reduce waste or reduce emissions in our energy usage in any way?
Absolutely. So in 2015, the board signed up for the Better Building Challenge, and in that it was agreeing to, over a 10-year period, we would save 20% in energy savings. Well, guess what? By 2019, we reached that goal, so we renewed that commitment and increased our level of energy savings to be 35% in that 10-year span. So we are still working on that. The same thing, we put in place a 10% savings commitment on water consumption. So we have not made nearly as much progress with that, but we are making some progress toward that. So we hope to make our goal in that 10-year, which would be 2025. Always our goal is to divert from landfill. So we do have a very active recycling and composting program. And I know Hannah, we could give you the latest information. Actually, we just presented Tuesday through MOASBO on our sustainability efforts, and I forget the exact number of tons that we have diverted from the landfill.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Awesome.
We look forward to hearing how the progress continues and getting the full report.
Thank you.
Okay, before we begin our next work session, we're going to take a quick recess, and we will resume in about 5 minutes. We are back and had at least one message from a remote board member that we need to speak up a little bit. So just try and speak up, enunciate, and that should be fine. So next up, we have 15.02, a work session on the proposed middle school boundary changes. So I'd like to invite back to the podium Patty Bedborough, our CFO, and with her Mr. Paul Tandy, Chief Communication and Emergency Management Officer, and Dr. Chelsea Watson, who will start things off, our Deputy Superintendent.
Good evening, President Todd and Vice President Hopper, members of the board, Dr. Marty, and Mrs. Stover. Thanks for having us back here this evening. So as you know, we're holding a work session this evening, but before we get started with your feedback and your questions, we want to share just a few pieces that we've shared before with you and a couple of new pieces of information. And of course, all of this began based on our work around Facilities 2030. Oops, going the wrong way. So again, purpose tonight, review a few pieces of information, present some new information, and respond to any questions that you may have. As always, we start with our mission. Our mission is about all of our students, and so as we think about this conversation and the proposal that we have moved forward to you, it is based on our work and thinking about all of our students in the Parkway School District. Our 3 goals with our strategic plan, which we've reviewed before, but these have been key pieces of information that we have to work with as we think about the board policy around attendance areas. So, speaking of board policy, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Tandy.
Well, good evening. We've discussed the board guidelines before, and after the last meeting, it was someone recommended we ought to also mention the actual policy. And so we do have policy JC that governs the process we use when we look at possibly changing attendance boundaries. I know since I've been here, we've done this. This would be the 4th time for me. And someone mentioned we ought to mention the actual policy because we haven't talked about that. Policy is very short, but basically it does say that from time to time when the superintendent deems that we may need to look at boundaries, that we present a recommendation to you, that we use the established guidelines, which I'll go over briefly again with you. And then we basically place a notice with the community, allow some time for public comment, and then you make a decision. So that is the policy JC, and then the guidelines are sort of what guides the development of the whatever recommendations are brought forward. And I'll just briefly, I know we've gone through these before, but we wanted to just real quickly go through them again. First of all, to support the neighborhood school concept, to try to students to attend the school nearest their home as much as you can, as long as the school can educationally and physically provide a quality program. To favor students presently enrolled over prospective new students. So that's one of the reasons you'll see in the recommendations like this one and the previous ones where we try not to make a student who's currently in a school change that from that school to another school, that they could finish out through that school and have it phased in over time and more impact new students. And to avoid moving for 1 year only, obviously you don't want to do that. We don't want to ever make a recommendation that we think is really short term. Dr. Tyson provides our enrollment projections. We know we're fairly comfortable out to about 5 years. And unfortunately, after you get past 5 years, it's hard to really accurately determine where it's going to go, but we feel good that we wouldn't bring a proposal to you that we didn't think was good, at least throughout that period of time. And obviously, safety is a major factor. You wouldn't want to have, for example, students who have to walk, the walk students to cross a major road. To equal, and this is a big one, equalize the number of students in each building as near as possible according to its capacity. So as you have seen, that's been one of the issues we have with the West Middle School, and then compared to the 2 South Middle Schools, which have excess capacity. And obviously, you do not want to split, whenever possible, kids in the same subdivision, which we're not doing. And the one guideline that we're not accomplishing with this recommendation is the next one, which is to maintain or to coordinate when practical the attendance areas of elementary and secondary so they don't split into, like right now we have that at Highcroft and Mason Ridge. And we like to try to avoid that if possible, so we have not accomplished that one. As I've mentioned in the past, a lot of times with some of these guidelines, if you meet one, you can't necessarily meet the other, but your goal is to meet as many of these as possible through the recommendation. And then finally, to allow as many students as possible to remain in the school they're now attending. And then that would be the case with this recommendation. You would not be changing the school you're currently enrolled in. Okay, so that's the policy and guidelines, just kind of as a reminder, and I'll turn it now back over to Dr. Watson.
Okay, so the proposed solution, once again, is to begin transitioning students from Piermont to South Middle and from Hannah to Southwest Middle School beginning in the upcoming school year. So this evening, we've already highlighted board policy and guidelines, facilities 2030, our strategic plan, and the proposal. This slide just lists out the topics that we have previously addressed here with the board and or through the 2 webinars where we sought input from the community. Tonight, we are going to review a few things with you, and you will see those highlighted there with the red arrow. Some enrollment projections, timeline, and special assignment. Again, those are things we've talked about before, but we want to review a few of those pieces with you this evening. So next, Mrs. Bedborough is going to get started.
Good evening once again. I'm going to begin with some of the middle school enrollment projections. These are slides that we used last spring. So as you'll notice that in the column with 2021, that still is in a projection stage. I just want to let you know that Dr. Tyson is so accurate that our total enrollment is 3942, so an increase of 30 students. So definitely statistically accurate here in our projection. So kudos, Dr. Tyson. So the first table there shows the expected enrollment by middle school by year as the boundary lines exist today. The second table depicts the estimated and projected enrollment by school based on the change of Piermont attending South Middle School 1 year at a time, and then of course Hannah Woods moving to Southwest Middle 1 grade level at a time as well. So when we look at this, we also want to point out the changes by year. So just seeing it table versus table, it might be easier that we really look at what is the real movement each year. So in the first year of change, which is fall of next year, you'll see that West Middle has a decrease of 87 students, Southwest Middle has an increase of 96, and South Middle has a decrease of 2. With a net change of 7. You may ask, why is that not a zero change? Well, that is because all of our projections are based on cohort survivals. So as you put the new students into the formulas that exist for each of those schools, it slightly changes our total estimated student counts as well. In the second year of change, you'll see that the total change in West Middle would be an estimated reduction of 155 students, an increase at Southwest Middle of 86 students, and a reduction of South Middle of 16. And in that third year, that final year, it would have a total impact of a decrease at West Middle of 252 students, Southwest Middle, an increase of 252, and South Middle, an increase of 22. And then, of course, just the next year of implemented change is noted for year 2025. I kind of look and use the slide that we utilized last year as our beginning, in the spring when we began this discussion. We referred to the students that would be first impacted with this change were originally fourth graders, and this would happen in their sixth grade year. So as we are here now in the fall of 2021, we know that the students impacted are the current fifth graders. So next year, they would be moving then to the sixth grade at the new middle school. So at South Middle, if they are currently Piermont students, and if they're Hannah Wood students, then they would start attending Southwest Middle. And, and then the same, our current fourth graders, then in their sixth, so in 2 more years, when they're sixth graders, that's when they would begin attending the new middle schools, both South Middle and Southwest Middle. And then the current third graders would begin the new middle school in 2024. Of course, the second graders and the first graders, kindergartners, they would go in that same pattern then as well. So next up, I am going to turn this back over to Dr. Watson as she continues with some of our subjects for review.
Thank you. All right, one of the topics to review is special assignment. And so I do want to point out that since 2016, we have not been accepting special assignments to West Middle unless a sibling was currently attending the school. At that point in time, we really noticed the overcrowding and we had to make an adjustment. So we were not continuously adding students to that population. So as we move forward and we think about this proposal, we would continue with that same philosophy, is no special assignments unless a sibling is attending the school when the new sibling enters the school. With this being the case with special assignments, transportation is not provided, but clearly, if you have an 8th grader in the school and your 6th grader joins, we are already running a route for that 8th grader, so that 6th grader certainly can get on that bus because we're running that route for the 8th grader. But once that 8th grader moves on, we will not run a route for the student who will then the next year be in 7th grade, because part of special assignment is that we do not provide transportation, and that's on the form that parents sign off on when they request a special assignment. But certainly would entertain those special assignments because we want to keep families together in the same school if that is their desire. So new information tonight. Little new information, a little bit more information about middle school size. We were asked by Mr. Seltzer at the last meeting if we asked the staff at West Middle any input, and I will talk about that. Patty will come back and talk a little bit more about transportation and building capacity. So this is a slide that we shared with you previously, and we talked about school size and how school size makes a difference, and that was based on the research that we as a superintendent's action team did in reviewing that literature. Most recently, we contacted the Education, Technology Services, and Research firm. It's a best practices firm that we have utilized over the years to help us with educational research, suggestions, and so forth. And so they provided us a number of summaries of specific studies regarding middle school size. And so in our summary, this is what we found. The research that they shared state that smaller schools have an improved school climate, and that larger middle schools have increased operational efficiency. And so what we know is that a positive school climate impacts the overall social, emotional, academic, and physical well-being of our students. And as we think about our 4 C's and our mission, we also think about our strategic plan, and we do our very best to allocate resources responsibly and be efficient with the funds that we have here in Parkway. So as we consider those factors and we consider the policy and the guidelines, that is why we have the proposal in front of you. So Dr. Miller worked with Dr. Tyson in developing a survey for teachers. Dr. Miller began with her building leaders who sought input from the folks in their department to identify any concerns that they may have had regarding enrollment. As you see with this question, the enrollment size of West Middle is a concern for me. 90% of the folks who completed this survey believe that the enrollment size is a concern. These are the areas that Dr. Miller asked the staff to rate in the survey. So as you can see, teachers identified meeting student needs as their most significant concern when they completed the survey. And each response, just so you can know how this wonderful bar graph has been developed by Dr. Beckner here, each response was given a point value, 8 points, and so you can see in that descending order the areas of greatest concern all the way down. You also will see that that next area of concern, very close to the first, is lack of space and inability to move around freely and safely. And then next, inequitable workload. And then you can see those others and how the staff rated their concerns. With the survey, the teachers, the staff were able to give additional feedback. I'm going to share some of their quotes. A special educator said that there's a need to pull students one-on-one, and the only space is the library or the hallway, and that's a distraction, and it doesn't give them privacy. This person shares a room with 4 other teachers throughout the day, and this teacher's desk is in the hall. One person said, West Middle puts students at a disadvantage. Another person, while extremely disappointed from a parent and taxpayer perspective, I truly believe moving Piermont to South Middle would result in a better outcome for students and faculty alike. This part-time teacher recognizes that he or she is there based on the increased enrollment. And this person said, when I look objectively at the big picture, I advocate for a reduction in enrollment on the grounds of safety and equity. Next person communicated that they haven't had their own classroom in 4 years, and they teach in an open area. Larger class sizes put students at a disadvantage compared to other schools. Students receive less one-on-one attention and help. Meeting individual needs is becoming harder. This person said that they don't teach PE, but they know it's been a huge problem area. The sheer number of students in that given space is very concerning. Next person said, I know overcrowding can be a concern, especially if it gets worse, but it has seemed manageable so far. This person shared that they strongly believe that the number of students is a safety issue. Kids are pushed and jostled as they pass through hallways. It needs to be changed. Next person talked about their range of classes, and there's not enough room for students to move or utilize the space in a safe manner. It's hard to help students, and they also addressed grading and giving feedback has become challenging based on the sheer numbers. This person did not support moving Piermont to South Middle, but the person went on to say that I'm not sure what an alternative option or options are at this time. There's a big difference in overall workload for all staff at West Middle compared to staff peers at other middle schools. I would want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all students to the best of our abilities. Meeting the needs is quite difficult. The nurse is at capacity. And this person talked about being a tall adult and how passing time makes this person anxious. The hallways attached to the wells are also menacing during passing periods. An emergency that required everyone to leave at the same time, this person said that there might be a danger of kids getting hurt trying to exit the building. The safety concerns are real. This special educator said that they don't have space to pull students and work with them in one-on-one or in small groups. Students with social, emotional, and sensory needs, they have difficulty managing that. There's not sufficient staffing for counseling, library, and reading interventions. And to alleviate the overcrowding of hallways, students must go outside to get to electives and to get to lunch. This next person is a special educator and shared that they were hired in 2010. And at that time, teachers had more time to work with fewer students and give more attention to each one. Now it feels like a grind. They're not able to meet all students' needs. This person also talked about the hallways and the traffic jam, but yet 10 years ago, the hallways were manageable. Last two comments. It's difficult to do our jobs effectively. This feels like a no-brainer. This time, I'm going to turn it back over to Patty Bedborough.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. I am going to go through two topics that have come up as themes in some of our questions that we've received. One is, what is the impact on this transition and special assignments on our transportation routes? As you know, we are in a bus driver shortage currently, so we have had a reduction of 4 complete routes overall with our general ed population. So certainly we have been struggling for this. So we know, looking ahead, when we are having the transition, allowing both special assignment and existing students transportation to West Middle and to South Middle, and then also having the new routes established for our students that will be going to their new attendance center. We know that we will have a little increase in what we need for, they're called runs. So a complete route would have 3 tiers. So this would be the middle school run is that middle tier. So based on Mr. Will Rosa is here, our Director of Transportation. So based on his analysis for the first year, 2022-2023, and for the second year, 2023 and 2024, he's estimated that we will need a total of 3 additional runs on that middle route, so on that second tier. And then in the third year, 2024-2025, there'll be a reduction in the total miles traveled because we won't be then doing that first route that was established from Piermont to West Middle and from Hannah Woods to South Middle. In 2024-25, there'll be a reduction then of 4 runs in that second tier as well. These estimates are based on students currently enrolled and do not have an estimate in there for the special assignment. So it's assuming that all students will go to the buses assigned. So it may actually have a reduction in the number of buses that are needed. So in the 2 years of transition, while we would need to add those 3 runs within that second tier, this may not equate to 3 new bus drivers. And why? Because we run 100 other routes, and depending on their expansion or compression, it may or may not add a driver. However, when we look at that third year, and we have the reduction of the 4 runs, we also may not have the luxury of reducing an entire driver as well. So it all depends on the fluxing and flexibility of the other routes as well. So It could add, and it may not. Next up is a main question that has come through on building capacity. And I know we have reported this at a prior meeting. Many have done extensive research and pulled out this capacity report that is contained in our CAFR, our Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. This report was developed years ago when we started applying for the ASBO International Certificate of Reporting Excellence. And one of the requirements was to provide a building capacity report. The information that's included in here takes our room numbers and assigns a capacity. It is more of a capacity of fire code and not what is desirable for an educational environment. In some of the analysis that we've done to do a deeper dive, we've actually looked at our classroom size comparisons by school. As you can see, we have everything being called a classroom from 100 square foot to 300 square foot to our extra large rooms, which would include a lot of our band rooms, choir, etc., which would be over 1,000 square foot. So, of course, West Middle does have the most classrooms, noted at 83, but of those 83, 4 are between 100 square foot and 300 square foot, and 3 are between 300 square foot and 500 square foot. So as you know, Dr. Miller has made use of every nook and cranny, including prior conference rooms, etc., to make those educational spaces where perhaps intervention takes place and everything else. When we compare that to the size of Southwest Middle School, while you see that total classroom number as 60, we also want to point out that there are many classrooms that are not included, rooms that are classroom size space that are not included in that 60 count, simply because they have the ability to spread out many of their activities. Even the TS, the technical support specialist, has all of his setup in an entire classroom. So that's not included in this classroom count. American Sign Language uses a classroom that is only utilized 2 hours a day. We have office space for CTE, which is in a full-size classroom that could also be turned into a full classroom. On top of that, at Southwest Middle, we do have the luxury of having a whole commons area that previously had been utilized for large group meetings such as this. It's an area probably about the same square footage that's located in the middle of Southwest Middle School. And if needed, that area could be converted in the future into classroom space as well. When we look at this as a percentage of total, you can see that larger classrooms and class sizes are in our buildings that are a percentage of the total, at Southwest Middle than we have at West Middle. West Middle does have quite a few smaller classrooms that are utilized. Dr. Miller's also made an excellent use of many spaces. She's converted locker rooms into classrooms. She even has some classrooms that are, I will say, blocked by file cabinets to create a classroom in a hallway area as well. So certainly not the most ideal learning spaces for our students, but certainly maximize the use of the space. So now I will turn this over then to to Paul once again.
Okay, just sort of to summarize, as we mentioned, we do have policy and guidelines that drive this work. And I went back, was looking for some information today, and I found those guidelines as far back as the 70s, so we've had them for a long time. It is part of our ongoing strategic planning. We've been talking about this through Project Parkway and Facilities 2030 for some time. I know we were hoping to get to this, and then COVID hit. this particular topic, and we just felt like we needed to still try to move forward with it. But it is part of our overall strategic planning work. And we've presented the timeline to you that we would propose to begin a phase in the fall of 2022. And based on the enrollment projections that we have, we feel good that it's a long-term solution, or as long as we can get with our projections. We have made accommodations for siblings and special assignments. And the other topics on the slides are just the things that we have discussed in the past with you, the various options and the rationale for consideration. And then tonight in the red, there's some additional things that you've asked us to discuss with you tonight. So that is essentially where we are. And at this point, I think we'd like to seek your feedback and questions and discussion. And we still have more. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think in a minute, we'll probably run through board members and have them share experiences. But before we do that, first of all, thank you. But I'll open it up for any board members that have any questions for any one of the three or the building principals specifically, and unless you want to wait until you're going through your perspectives.
I can go first. Okay. One of the comments that's come back and feedback is on academic performances between different schools. Could you just comment on the way schools are kind of graded, and possibly just the perception that one school may be better than another?
We'll try the handheld mic to see if this works. So certainly there are no two schools in the entire state of Missouri that perform at exactly the same level, even schools within the same district. And there are many factors that go into that. We know that there are differences in scores among our student population. We know because every year we present you to the board our annual achievement report. We know we've been working on achievement gaps between different groups of students, opportunity gaps, different pieces. So certainly the diversity of our schools plays a role in that. We do have high quality curriculum, amazing teachers, great resources in all of our schools. So we certainly look at how our schools are performing overall, but we also look at how they're performing with individual student populations. And when we break that down, West Middle students and South Middle students in those various groups perform very similarly. But we also know that there are differences in populations among those schools, so that's certainly one factor that plays heavily in that. And we see that across our schools, where we have larger students who come from, for example, lower socioeconomic status. Just the data unfortunately tells us that scores are reflective that they tend to be a little bit lower. That doesn't mean the curriculum's lower quality, the teachers are lower quality, the school's lower quality. It just means that we have to work harder, with those students and continue to close those gaps. All of our schools, even at that time, are performing well. All of our schools, if we go back to 2019, and which is the last year that we have good MAP data, because we know we didn't do the MAP test in 2020, and then in 2021, not all of our students participated because of the pandemic. All of our middle schools are in the top 20% of all middle schools in the entire state in both ELA and math, so that we know our students get a quality experience regardless of their school.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. For everyone at home, that was Dr. Beckner. So I guess from now on, if we can have whoever's responding to questions at the podium so that you're actually on camera so people at home know who is speaking, that would be helpful.
Excellent. Then we should abandon our handheld mic program we've got going on down here.
Well, you can take it with you to the podium, but I just know the camera's not looking over there. So, anyone else?
I have a couple of questions. One of these I sent earlier today because it's kind of a history question, and I know it probably took a little bit of research. What was Piermont's original middle and high school feeder pattern, and how many times has that pattern changed, and approximately when?
Well, I can tell you that I looked at newsletters from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s with Mr. Tandy this afternoon and his assistant, and it's very interesting how the things that Parkway put in newsletters back then. So I will tell you the information that we were able to clearly identify. So first of all, Piermont opened in 1967, and students originally attended South Junior, okay, the space where we are. Now the next gets a little muddy. So South Junior opened in 1964, and over the first 5 years that South Junior was opened, that enrollment blossomed, is the best way to say it. They started off with 453 students, and by the end of 1968, they had 1,349 students. And South Junior covered all of the schools in the southern attendance area and the west attendance area at that point in time. And so, clearly, this area that South Junior covered became quite large because we had a lot of students in South Junior. So, building bursting at the seams, what they did do is they had students in the southern area, the south, come from 7 to 12:30, west 11 to 4:30, and that continued until West Junior opened in 1971. We also know that in 1969 and 1970, students who would go to West Middle were attending West High in grades 7 through 9, simultaneously while we had students attending South Junior. Where that split was, we don't know. We also know that in 1983, students who attended Piermont moved to West Middle because of South Middle's attendance at that time, which then Southwest, a number of years later, opened because of the number of students in the South attendance area. So those are the facts that we have been able to find in regards to the question that you asked.
I appreciate the effort that you put into that. I think it shows that these issues are really complicated, and some of the solutions that we've done in the past have been things that we would never consider doing today. This question is actually mostly for Mr. McQuarrie. There's a lot of concern about the transition for students who are coming into one middle school and then going to two different high schools. And I know this is kind of asking you to project into the future, but what are some of the programs or processes that you would see yourself putting in place to make sure that every South Middle student had a successful transition to high school, no matter what high school they were going to?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that we've started to think about. And for those who may not be aware, just to give you an idea of the proximity to Piermont, when we are out doing recess duty, we can actually hear the Piermont folks on their walkie-talkies. So we're that close. But, you know, I thought just something as small as the Patriot, which is our mascot, versus the Longhorn, and how we would have to really take into consideration and make sure that students for both feeder patterns would feel like this is their home school. And that we would have to really think about Dr. Pacini and I working to, as we have those students come over into 6th grade, to ensure that everyone felt like they were part of this community. So, and you know, to be honest, we would have to make a very concerted effort to ensure that students, whether they were going to South High or West High, felt like they were, you know, to reduce that competition that might exist. But, you know, I think also the positive of it is that students can start building relationships in middle school, regardless of where they go to high school.
Do you want us to do questions, like any questions we have now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So one of the things I will mention when I just talk about my perceptions, is concern about using taxpayer money to build anything new when we have space in existing, when we have existing space that we can use. That said, one of the solutions that people have raised is the idea of the 6th grade center, which would use existing building space but shift the educational model. So can somebody speak to why we don't want to pursue the 6th grade, or why the recommendation is not around pursuing the 6th grade center?
Well, thanks for the question. We did a little research around this one as well, knowing that there are well over 500 school districts in the state of Missouri. We were able to identify that there, as of last year, were only 7 6th grade centers in use across the state. One of them, 2 were in the St. Louis area, but one of the 2 in the St. Louis area actually closed this year, and that was in Webster Groves, where they transitioned their existing middle school, Hickson Middle, into a 6th through 8th grade facility. So I also was able to speak with my counterpart in Webster Groves, ask a little bit about that. Part of, they needed the space where the 6th grade center was, but they said that this will give us a lot more time with our students, because we know one of the things that's most challenging in the whole educational scope is that transition from elementary to secondary. And there's lots of research about those transitions and the challenge of those transitions, where you're leaving one context, one community, one maybe principal or assistant principal you've known, and moving it into an entirely different setting. And we know that multiple transitions can be more difficult for students. So going from elementary to middle to high reduces that, whereas going from elementary to a 6th grade center to then a middle school to then a high school introduces another one of those transitions where there's an opportunity for some challenges, some stresses, some just tensions with that relationship and that shift, because there is quite a bit of research about that, that transitions are just more difficult for students. In some cases, it's needed when there are no other options, and so districts do it. But those, we've seen many of those transitioning to grade level setups where there are fewer transitions. I was able to find one lengthy article, and I'll just quote one piece of it for you so that we all know just sort of where the research state is on that. It says, the best quote unquote grade level organization, for schools seeking definitive answer on the best grade level organization, no definitive answer exists. What exists are various lists of pros and cons of each grade level pattern, which must be examined and evaluated in light of each local district's needs. And is again that, well, what's really needed at this time in these places. I also did a little bit of just number work on this too. If this were to become a 6th grade center for West Middle, presumably that means South area students will go to Southwest Middle, which would put well over 1,100, almost 1,200 students at South Middle, which is again pushing on some of the things we've heard tonight about ideal school size, those pieces. Even if you left the existing South Middle students here, it would push us close to 1,000 students. So again, then we're running into just some of those same capacity issues that we've already been discussing.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions. I guess the first, I don't know who this is for. The 93 teachers that we surveyed at West Middle, is that the number of teachers that we have? Did we get 100% participation?
No, I have quite a few more. It was optional, so those that participated in each week, I send out a newsletter, put the survey in there. They had already talked with their department leader. The department leader got feedback on what the teachers' concerns were, and then we put that into a survey so that they could voice their opinion on that. To get 100% of a survey is really difficult. I would say we have about 148 staff members, so large percentage that did participate in it.
Pretty good response. Dr. Miller, while you're there at the podium, I'm really curious to know, because we haven't had you join us before, but we would love to hear your perspective of the building and how things, just how things are.
I know this is like an emotional and difficult subject for many people. I do feel like I have to listen to the staff that I supervise and their concerns, student concerns. And I think one of the most important pieces is the equitable workload. So I know a lot of people have talked about class size and dug into that, but if you look at the structure that we have for a middle school and, you know, assistant principals and who oversees, you know, the amount of staff along with our counselors, it's, you know, I think it's sixth grade, 380 some odd kids comparatively to many of the other schools that are 250, 200. I don't know what Mr. McQuarrie's is, but I would say maybe 180, I don't know. So when you look at meeting the needs of all kids, for our counselors and our administrators who are, you know, we travel with them. So you have the same administrator in sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade. And I wouldn't want to ever change that model. It works very well. They get to know families, they get to know kids, but it does put them at a disadvantage to try to serve that many students. And, you know, I will say when we have administrators that have to be out for any sort of reason or meetings, those are always challenging. Dr. Watson probably gets irritated with me when we have meetings of development and I want to dictate what time it should be based on lunchtime. I mean, it's just a fact that, you know, we're serving lunch to about 380 kids, so it is a concern. Don't tell the kids, but we are kind of outnumbered. So, I mean, those are my concerns. I get this is not a popular thing, but I do spend a lot of time managing the amount of students, the amount of staff, and, you know, just daily, what are we, in the 7th week of school? Like, we've spent a lot of time, like, readjusting traffic patterns, the ways we deliver lunch, and I don't mean deliver, but, you know, just tightening the bolts so we can have a better outcome with our students so they can be more productive, use their time wisely, be able to be in class. You know, that takes a lot. I mean, just even our traffic flow, getting in and out of the school, if any of you have ever experienced that, it's really exciting, fun. Mr. McQuarrie, we were here for a meeting one day and, you know, it was almost at dismissal, and no offense at all, but he said, you know, the meeting was ending, everybody should probably get out quickly so you bypass the bus and the traffic. And I literally was pulling out kind of laughing because I know for him it's definitely changed, but I literally had to count the buses. There was 12 when there's 32 at West Middle. Now, I'm just saying it just takes a lot more management and moving parts, which then causes my focus not to be on helping teachers become better, meeting with teachers about data, you know, focusing on achievement instead of focusing on, and I get that's totally a part of my job, but you know, that takes a lot of energy in making sure people are safe and moving through the building safely. So there's my perspective, probably not popular, but I totally get it. I mean, I'm a West area parent. So I get that this becomes a really tough decision. I appreciate all the love for West Middle. Don't get me wrong, I really do. I started my job in Parkway at South Middle. I think it's a great school. I'm Mr. McQuarrie's mentor. I think he's a great principal. So, I mean, I think we have a great school district. It's just the equity of workload. Another example is our PE teachers. We're currently using the small gym and the cafeteria, and I get that it's COVID, but even if it wasn't COVID, we wouldn't all fit in the cafeteria. So one of the things we talked about is making a 4th lunch. That will make lunch go really long. Kids would either eat, you know, 10 o'clock or 1:30, and a 4th lunch would have caused us this year to have to divide up a class where they would be in class and have to come back for like 15 minutes. that's not a good use of academic time. I don't know, you know, the teachers in the building probably would not have been happy with that option. You know, by the time you get the kids back in, you got 15 minutes. It's almost a waste of time. So we chose to continue our 3 lunches. And the way we had to divide it up is mixed grade level, which is not optimal for all our kids, but that's the way we could be able to balance how many kids ate at one time, because our 6th grade currently is at 384 kids. So we just didn't even have the capacity with the small gym. For us, setting up in the small gym takes a lot of manpower every day. I've increased my biceps from, you know, I mean, we're physically putting up tables, taking them down. I'm not sure that's a good use of my time, but that's what we have to do. So, I mean, I'm not complaining, I'm just stating the facts of the challenges we have compared to other schools. There's, you know, it's just different challenges for us. Not sure if I did talk a little bit about PE. So we have 7 PE teachers and basically 5 spaces when it's indoor facilities. So we have the fitness room, the large gym would be 2 spaces, the small gym would be 2 spaces. So 2 classes are in the small gym, 2 classes in the large gym. One would be able to use the fitness room. Not ideal unless you're, you know, in weight training or cardio. So, you know, if the weather's bad, they have to go to the health room. That might not be on the plan for what the curriculum is following. I know PE teachers are not real happy with us because we had to use the small gym. So we got it down to a fine science, but in the beginning, we had to kind of kick out that class before, and the class after was suffering because of our setup and takedown of lunch. Now we've gotten that down to about 15 minutes, and we try not to impede them too much, but like for that 15 minutes, that's good cardio right there. Not for the kids, for me and the rest of the staff. So,
and this might not be a question for you, but I had asked a question based on some feedback that we got from the community back in I don't know, April or May, about the possibility of adding on to West. I know it's a large, complicated building already, but has there been any further discussion about you know, that feasibility and whether or not that could even work?
So, have we literally looked at the property to see if we can expand? I will say we've tossed around the idea, but we haven't necessarily explored it. Going back to the comment on part of our charge and goal 3 and the strategic plan is making sure that we are making the best use of all of our facilities. So knowing that we have excess capacity at Southwest Middle, part of our charge is to ensure that we are maximizing the use of existing facilities prior to just making the decision to add on to a building that is already larger than the other 4 middle schools and has a much higher enrollment than the other schools as well. But if you want us to pursue looking into that, certainly we can look further into that.
We've already added on to the school. We added the 6th grade center when we moved 6th graders to the middle school. And then about the last year or 2 before I left, we added the 2nd gym. So it has had additions.
Several additions along the way. I did not bring that data with me at all, but I know when we were looking at that, we did know that. And I will say we've maximized some of the interior spaces even recently, working with Dr. Miller too, to create classroom spaces in the area that used to be known as the locker rooms. That became 2 locker bays. That became 2 classrooms, and then converted some of our conference rooms into smaller classrooms as well.
I'd like to ask Dr. Miller, what do parents say?
That's a great question. I honestly don't know that parents, given the last couple of years, have really been into our building. I would say, I mean, parents probably want their kids to go to the school they've been going to or projected to go to, right? I will say that we often get, concerns about maybe something that happened in the hallway, maybe something that happened in PE class where there's just 30 kids to a class. Those kind of situations, but I don't know that that is something just isolated to us. I'm sure Mr. McQuarrie gets similar, maybe not the same in the hallway. South Middle has some really wide hallways, so I don't know that it's just totally built different than West Middle. So,
But parents aren't complaining.
not specifically like there's too many kids in this building to that specific statement, no. But
Do you
again, I
think-
don't think parents live or see. Now, I will say, and this is hard to kind of remember because we haven't had parents in the building, but open house, concerts, things like that, traffic is a problem and people in the building is a problem. So when we would have open house, like typical other schools might have to do shifts of times. The last open house in person we had, we really made like a range from, and I'm guessing, so don't hold me accountable this time, from 6 to 8:30, and people came as they wanted. But typically, when we've had open house, every year since I've been at West Middle, so this is my 8th year as principal, 12th year as an administrator, we've had to bus parents in because there just wasn't enough room. So we would have a bus that would take parents from West High. Not everybody took advantage of it, but we encouraged them to park at West High or the old Gold's Gym till they told us we couldn't do that anymore. And then the bus would bring the parents down and then send the parents back up. But definitely, our concerts, our stadium seating or benches, what is the word for that? I'm sorry, it's late. The seating in the gym, yeah.
Bleachers.
Bleachers, there's the word, bleachers. We have to put several rows of folding chairs out because there just isn't enough room in the bleacher area. Even when we have, just like a 6th grade performance, I know that we're getting ready to have some performances and definitely limiting the amount of people there, but also limiting 6th grade will be this day, 7th grade will be this day, 8th grade will be this day. So, not sure if I answered that all completely, but I would say the complaints would come on those nights, conferences, open house, about, where to park, how to get people out. It's a fine science, especially in that road that goes behind. We would have to put up no parking, because people would park on both sides and then nobody could get out. Our staff would always park on the front field and hoping that it wasn't wet, so that we could open up as much space for the parents to park and get through.
I remember when I was PTO president at West Middle for a couple of years, I would get complaints from people that didn't even have kids at West Middle about the traffic backing up early in the morning or at dismissal, blocking intersections far up Baxter Road, even across Clayton. So.
Yeah, I agree. And then the neighboring neighborhoods, long before even more parents bringing their kids to school, there would be a lot of neighborhoods that would be really upset with kids and parents picking up kids walking to Broadmoor or the subdivision to the north, I guess. I think of my directionals, about kids being picked up there because parents are trying to avoid the traffic. So, I think the traffic flow, we got down. If everybody's just patient, we can get people out of there pretty quickly. But that definitely a traffic, and occasionally, Ms. Hill could probably tell you that we'll have people turn around in the middle of the drop-off line, which is really unsafe. And
I've seen some things in that parking lot that are just
I thought the signs that
horrifying.
said, we love our children, please drive careful would work. Stole that from Central Middle. It just, people are in a hurry.
I've literally seen the SRO have to chase someone up the driveway when a truck on Baxter Road tried to go around and bypass everybody in the line. And I wasn't going to discuss the drop-off and pickup situation because that wasn't part of my tour. I didn't come at that time of day, but I did hear from other board members what the drop-offs and pickups were like at the other schools, and the situations are not comparable at all as far as the amount of time it gets and the amount of traffic.
I do think one of the concerns that I do have is, and we just recently changed this, is a lot of our administrators were outside trying to get kids in and controlling traffic. I recently have moved inside because there's traffic inside and just getting kids to the right spot, but so that's difficult too. And we've adjusted that several times, like we at one point had to kind of move our police officer inside just to help kids get to class. I mean, they're social beings. They want to be around each other. Nothing bad particularly, but just trying to get them to do what they're supposed to do and to the right place.
Dr. Miller, I want to just, when I was at West early in the year, you shared with me your concerns about new students and their lack of to get them scheduled. There's very limited opportunity for them in electives. Do you want to share?
Currently, right now, when people move into the district, especially I believe in 7th grade, they're going to have very limited choice in electives. And I mean very limited, like they're going to get choir for one of their electives. Choir's great, but if you're a student that, you know, doesn't want to sing and you want art, that's not real conducive. Our electives are very full. Our engineering class is 30 kids. And really at West Mill, there's a fine formula, you know, like an engineering class, there can only be 2 sections of 6th grade, 2 sections of 7th grade, and 2 sections of 8th grade, basically in the master schedule. So that, you know, that's the limited capacity. We could have a teacher do an overage, but in this block schedule, an overage would be super taxing on a teacher. You know, it'd be some days they wouldn't even get a break. I don't know, that's a healthy way to motivate and keep our teachers, you know, loving what they do. So electives are very, very tight. And this is really, I won't say the first year, but we really, when we put kids into classes this year, I really had to talk to my counselors. I've got great counselors and they really want to do what's best for kids. But it's really uncomfortable for them to tell kids they're not going to get their first choice, or, you know, we did a little bit of that in the past, but it was really clear this year that kids were not going to get a first choice. So they were going to get something on their elective that they chose, or maybe not. And, you know, just making sure we can make a schedule work and not overload a certain class with so many kids.
I wanted to ask, and I know it's been a long time since Sam's been running that building, and you've been there for, what, 4 or 5 or 6 years?
8.
Since
Just 8.
8, just 8?
I know, it's gone by fast, hasn't it?
But you've seen some changes, and Linda certainly saw changes before you, but somebody had mentioned earlier about the study from 2002 when there were 1,200 students in the building. How have the special programs in the building changed in the last 20 years? Specifically, you know, the deaf, hard of hearing, some of the special education programs. How have those grown or begun during that time that you know of?
So truth be told, when I was an intern at West Middle, so don't ask me the year, so it was 12 years ago, I was in the intern position because we didn't have 900 students in the building. So the intern was like an assistant principal, basically on a teacher contract. Worked for me, it was great. But my predecessor, Linda Lalonic, she was always trying to get more kids to come to West Middle, because when you had this intern position, it was turnover. You know, people would move on and become assistant principals. I was in the intern for 3 years. Again, it worked. It worked for me, it worked for my family. But she was constantly kind of recruiting the Highcroft kids to come to West instead of Central, which Dr. Vargas could probably attest to that. I believe at that time, and I can't remember the year when the DHH program came, but I think it came to Parkway, and Dr. Marty or Dr. Watson might know this a little bit better, and they needed, you know, somewhere for the countywide program, and I believe she volunteered to increase the enrollment to then increase having a full-time AP. So at the time I was the intern, there was 2 APs. So she was always trying to get the numbers to go up so that she wouldn't have a swinging door of a different person every year, which prior to me taking that position, every year it was somebody different. So that program came in, you know, that program has kind of gone up and down. It just ebbs and flows with how many students, but I do know currently, gosh, I apologize, I don't know the exact number, but the majority of those students are West area students. So removing that program, that's their home school. And if you know anything about the deaf community, especially in Missouri, a lot of people are, in the United States, a lot of people move to Missouri, specifically St. Louis, for all the programs that we have in this area. So I can just speak from parents that I know. When they move into this area, they move their kids at a young age. They move into the West area so all their children can eventually end up at the same schools. So that program, and then we had additional multiple handicap program added to West Middle at some point. That was probably before my time. So some of those programs have ebbed and flowed, and then the academy program also. So, you know, at one point, you know, we weren't even meeting 900 students in the building. So that was approximately 12 years ago to about 12 to 9 years ago. At my 4th year as an assistant, then I was, we were over 900. So I became an assistant principal. The following year, I became the principal. So we're talking 9 years ago, we went over 900, that threshold. That was kind of the guidelines for the district of when you had enough students to support more administrative help in the form of assistant principal. That was a long-winded answer, I apologize.
No, that's great, thank you. I know we want to get to board perspectives from school visits, but I know Kevin and Debbie haven't asked any questions yet, and I'm sure each of them have several.
Can I share something real quick?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I forgot to tell you, Dr. McPherson is not in this room with us, but he is with us, if you will. Any questions that you have for Dr. McPherson, Dr. Matheson is on chat with him. He will type the questions in, and Dr. McPherson will respond, and then Dr. Matheson will give the answer. So I forgot to share that he's not in the room with us, but he is accessible and ready for questions.
Thank you. Kevin, why don't we start with you? You have any questions?
I didn't hear. Who?
Well, Debbie, since I got you, go ahead and you can ask some
Okay, okay. I do have a question for Dr. Miller. Well, first of all, to all 3 of these principals and all the other building principals, I would like to thank you all for taking your time meeting with at least 7 board members on 7 different occasions to tour us through your buildings. I think it was a wonderful experience and really kind of helped to gain a bird's eye view perspective of what these issues are. So I thank you to all of the administrators for taking your time out to do that. It's an important issue, and that did help. One question I had for Dr. Miller, I'm glad you cited your history with Parkway Middle School and having gone to South Middle, so I think that you have some unique perspectives to bring to the table with your experience over time and seeing the evolution of how this middle school has changed and the efforts that you have put forth to try to make this high enrollment accommodated. One thing that we've heard from our community that hasn't been yet addressed is the idea of a flow analysis and bringing in an outside company of somebody that's a professional. We know that like Lindbergh School District has done similar things to look at some of their COVID protocols, and now they're building a new high school, and a lot of that was based on some flow studies that they had done. For Dr. Miller, do you see that an idea like that or any other ideas to look at the building could be helpful? Or do you really see that the single prong approach to just moving one cohort of students out of West Middle is the total answer? It still seems like you're still going to have some issues with high enrollment, even if this move were to take place. So what other things do you need, do you think, to help in addressing some of these concerns?
We have not done any kind of flow study. I do feel like daily I'm doing my own flow study. I am not an expert by any means, but you know, we adjust. I think I spoke to that earlier, to what's working. I mean, we model on improvement always, so we look at a situation, we're not afraid to try something new and move that along. I wouldn't be opposed to that idea. I think that another set of eyes is great in any situation. You know, I know moving the cohort is not an impact for a while, but I do think that although Dr. Tyson does a really good job of his numbers, the West Middle numbers seem to be off a little bit every year. And he and I have this discussion. I recall one conversation we had about it. He said, "What happened?" And I was like, what do you mean what happened? I don't know what happened. So, you know, even this year, we were projected at 1075 and we're at 1103. So, you know, even 30 kids over time. So I don't know if I have the answer to that. That would probably be a question for somebody else.
I guess one of my observations in going to all the other schools too is that this particular building is unique in that it's on 3 different levels. And when we look at South Middle, Southwest Middle, they're a nice big square. And everything seems very organized, and the different all the core courses are in one particular wing, and the kids are able to go to their locker and then stay within that same hallway to go to their core classes. Whereas at West Middle, everything is so spread out. And then kids have to, you know, it feels like they're buzzing around like bees to try to get from here and there and everywhere. And, you know, it's not a criticism, it's just the way it is. And so just, you know, and then there's bottlenecks and locker bays that, you know, we had talked about could possibly even still be removed if they're not going to be used because of some pinch points in the hallway. So just curious if, you know, if there's some additional efforts that need to go into this, you know, aside from trying to reduce the number of students enrolled in this school.
I think, you know, I'd be open to anything. I was making a list of the things that we've done at West Middle to accommodate the size, and it's over there. And so I'm going to try to remember everything is on it. But, you know, the conversion of 2 locker bays into classrooms, our tech specialist, CRS, did have an office. I think somebody referred to Southwest Middle, you know, they have a classroom. We moved him to a closet. He was not happy about it, but we moved him to what was formerly a closet because we needed the space that he was occupying. So there's another, we moved several office spaces that were formerly for secretaries or support staff in some way into classrooms. So we do have a speech room that is very small. It does have a smart board, but it's, you know, it is a very small classroom, one that was listed up there. Another example would be our reading specialist. The room she's teaching in actually was an old two old offices that the wall was taken down and making into a classroom, and it's real narrow. It was maybe two secretaries' office. Dr. Sarantino could probably tell us. There was one definitely where our budget secretary was. So, like, I'm at the point that we have exhausted everything that I can come up with. If there's somebody that can come up with something else, that would be great. I think at West Middle we have really done a great job, probably too good of job, of trying to accommodate the space and the capacity issue. One other thing we did when we restructured or had the science classrooms built, that renovation, we actually went back to, one of my assistants went back to the architect to squeeze out more classrooms. So our science rooms were very large, and we could get them down still to what code was, and we were able to add 2 health rooms, which we didn't even have a health room before. 2 health rooms and 2 real small, or one other small room that we could use for a speech room. You know, speech is, you got to be in a space with the doors closed so that, you know, kids can work on their speech, they can hear and things like that. Let me think just one more second. Yeah, I'll take, yeah, it's right there. In addition to all our special educators, you know, they don't really have their own classroom. If you've been in West Middle, we have like what I would call little alcoves. And so that's where they like basically have their desk. So we moved them all to those areas. We also had 2 computer labs that we turned into classrooms. So maybe other schools have done that also with the Chromebooks, but definitely immediately when we knew the Chromebooks, we were like, okay, we're going to take these computer labs down. Oh, right. And then we have that open classroom outside of, that one of our teachers spoke to that doesn't have any walls. So that's kind of inconvenient because it has a back door to the front office, so it's got a lot of interruptions. And I think, yeah, and the other thing we did was moving into our 6th grade area, we eliminated the use of lockers there because that was a big bottleneck. So we actually had to bring lockers from downstairs, upstairs, into our foreign language hall and next to the back of the office because we had, and I know this is going to be hard to understand, but we had kids who were 7th graders going to the locker bay because we had no other lockers for them to use. 6th grade has a ton of lockers because it kind of goes around the entire 6th grade area. We had 7th graders going to the locker bay to go to their locker and 6th graders coming out or trying to get into the locker bay. I mean, it was something we were managing. The district widened that and took the doors off. There were fire doors to there. Took those doors off, it kind of widened that, and then the next year we shut down those lockers, got lockers from downstairs, moved upstairs, because nobody ever wants lockers downstairs in a middle school. So, I mean, to Debbie's point, I mean, West Middle is just built differently than South Middle, Southwest Middle, Central Middle, Northeast, all of them. I think part of the problem is, you know, that first floor, second floor, third floor. If you haven't been in there, there's 3 floors. So, you know, the stairs are problematic, kids trying to get up and down stairs. We have also, to Debbie's point, moved where teachers teach for less travel for kids. We've messed with that a little bit. 6th grade's great. It's like this little compact thing and they don't really need to go anywhere. But when they go somewhere, we shoot them out door 5 to go in door 6, so they don't have to go through the main lobby. If you've seen 6th graders travel through the hall, they really, a lot of them think it's like a football field. They like duck and cover to try to get to where they're going. So, you know, but if the weather's bad, we can't take them out door 5 to enter door 6. And that also takes another body to supervise that. We wouldn't want kids going outside with no adult out there supervising. So we try to get them to go that path. Not all comply, because some have their own routes that they're doing, but, you know, that's also a science of getting, you know, the traffic flow. Again, not an expert on flow analysis, but I might be after this. Any other questions?
Debbie or Kevin, any other questions?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well. I appreciate the opportunity.
I would ask the principals at South Middle and Southwest Middle if they see any challenges or opportunities for their schools with this proposal, or if there are any concerns that they may have at all.
So the proposal doesn't really impact South Middle in terms of numbers or staffing. So there's no, I have no concerns over that. The challenge is going to be to make sure that members of the Piermont community feel like that they are part of the South Middle community. And I'm confident that if this proposal were to be voted upon by the board and accepted, that we would do a great job at ensuring that the Piermont community felt like they were part of our community, that we were one. So in terms of concerns about how it would impact South Middle, I think we would be great.
Please hold while Dr. McPherson is typing. I can see the dots going, dot, 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 dot. So while I'm here, I'm going to sing you a song. No, I'm just kidding. No, exactly. So
while we're waiting, I will just acknowledge, since I do have a child at West Middle and a graduate of Parkway West that went to West Middle, everything that Dr. Miller and her team have done to try to make it work as best as they can, because in some of the students' eyes, there's no problem. Some of the kids don't feel the strain that the adults are feeling. And so I think that says something to our administration in that building to try to make this as neutral to our students as possible. Now, that's not every student. I certainly haven't talked to every student, but seeing a difference between the other middle schools and what goes on at West Middle School, I have to say I can see some advantages to there being fewer students in some of the classrooms. And I was taken aback by a student in one of the technology, it was industrial technology, when Dr. Miller and I were touring, and the young man, the aisle was crowded, backpacks are in there, there was like 33 kids in the classroom. This little guy was moving out of his seat to move to the back area to go to the workspace, and he tripped and he fell with his Chromebook. And Dr. Miller kept saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" You know, I didn't see any instances of anything like that at any of the other schools. So, you know, as difficult as a decision, this is going to be a very difficult decision to make. And, you know, we all hear the things and contrasting and comparing the different schools. You know, you want the best for every single student, to have the best educational opportunities that there are. And I have seen a witness in all the schools that we have toured, nothing but compassion and caring, and from the administrators and the teachers to our students under difficult circumstances.
all right. He did mention that he doesn't see too many, or he sees it as a benefit. At Southwest Middle School, does not see too many major challenges, of course, with the transition of new students and those things, and working through that. His team would be ready and prepared to be able to do those things and make sure they assimilate and feel comfortable within the school. He also said that it may help with the master schedule and some other staffing areas. Maybe they'd be able to provide some other supports for kids. With that, assuming that additional staffing may come along with the increased enrollment, there are really only benefits that he sees to the plan at Southwest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any board members have any further questions before we get to personal observations? Okay. So we'll just use this opportunity for board members to share their observations from touring the different schools in question. Some of us have been to every school. Debbie really made a great effort this year of visiting every school after the start of school. But we've all visited these schools in question, and we went in with a notebook and made lots of notes. I took some pictures and just tried to really compare and contrast each building, the environments that the students were in. I know most of us, I believe, if not all of us, made it a point to be there strategically during the day when there were both passing periods, lunch periods. I know some of us saw gym periods, things like that. And so we really tried to spend a lot of time there to see different environments. So we'll do, kind of like we do board reports, we'll start at the end with Matt and just kind of work down the line and share experiences from those visits.
Thank you. Lots been shared already tonight, so I don't want to repeat a lot of that, what's already been said, but I'll start off by saying first off that 3.5 years ago when I joined the board, one of the first things that was brought to my attention was the challenges at West Middle, that we as a board would need to deal with those issues of capacity at West Middle 3.5 years ago. I do kind of put it on us now that we're finally getting around to it, because I think these challenges have been building. There may have been some hope to actually, maybe it'll work its way out. We need to make a hard decision. But I think we are now at a point where we need to make a hard decision. I thank the principals for giving us the tour. It was very enlightening. In some ways, it almost solidified the recommendation that we've heard and the thoughts we've heard about the issues at West Middle. The educational delivery is a challenge at West Middle. The way that teachers have to teach in shared rooms, in smaller spaces, in non-private spaces, and the capacity issues around optional other classes for electives, to actually shift to a different class too if you're struggling in one, not having the capacity to do that. There are issues that we need to address as a board with West Middle to make it a better experience both for those students that are there and for the students who are actually going to shift. Because I think those students that will shift will have a better experience at South Middle. And I'll add to Dr. Miller's challenges at her school. The one she did not list that I've always noticed is room 2211. That is a room that is the former space behind the stage that requires 2 large stage steps to get up to. And they've had to add a large 3-foot-high 2211 so kids actually know where the classroom is. In terms of a flow study, it is packed. I'm not sure anybody could figure out a better way to make that school work, and kind of what Debbie said, I give her a lot of credit for making it work with those large number of students in that small space in an old building. And really, in some ways, to really make a major change would require knocking the building down. Adding on to it does not change the structure of its current space and the tight areas. And the one thing that also that kind of surprised me too was the fact that right now with COVID, we do have directional arrows on the floor, but they had directional arrows on the floor before COVID to actually manage the flow of the school. So those type of challenges have been around for a while, and we need to make a solution for it. We need to have a solution to actually better the experience for all those students. I visited Southwest and also South Middle. There is so much space at Southwest Middle. And Mr. McPherson wants more kids there. He'll be able to give his current students that are there, by adding Hannah Woods, a better experience overall, by actually increasing the educational opportunities for them, and better utilization of the space that they have at the building. It is a very well-built building with large hallways and massive spaces. And with South Middle then, you're shifting the kids. It's already a very well-built school. They have all the space you need with the hallways. It's a shifting of students. So I think as we look at the whole body of students in Parkway right now, the thing we want to do is give the best experience for those kids. I think with the shift of students out of West Middle, you're going to improve the experience there. You have a better educational experience. By shifting kids to Southwest Middle, you're actually going to increase the experience there too, both for the kids that are there and for those Hannah Wood kids. And then lastly with South Middle, it's a shift. So you're going to be able to actually handle the shift of other kids moving around and then give those kids that are moving in a better educational experience. I'll stop there for right now.
You'll have to excuse me while I speak because I wrote up all sorts of things. Many of them have already been said, and I would be so repetitive. But I'm going to share my observations from my tours. But before I do that, I wanted to speak a little bit about processes and impartiality as a board member. Like other members of this board, I take my role really, really seriously. I read all the documents, emails, I listen in meetings, and you've probably noticed that I always have a notebook next to me taking notes. I appreciated the extra opportunity we had to visit the schools after hearing from the district administration and community members about this proposal. One thing I've noticed during this process is that in letters to the board regarding this issue, it has been noted that myself, like a couple other members of this board, are West area parents. But when you become a school board member, the area of the school district you live in and the schools that your children attend must become irrelevant in your decision making. The viewpoint that each of us has to take is an impartial one based on what is best for the students of the district as a whole. I've made extra efforts to make sure that I reviewed and re-reviewed material presented to us, considering and reconsidering any biases that I may have. This is one of the reasons that I didn't just come out and say, this has been my kid's experience. This is what I've noticed. Because when it comes down to it, I have to look at all perspectives, not just the experience of my child. If I use the experience of my child in this decision making, I would be going against my oath as a board member. So, when I toured all three of these schools, I loved talking to all three of these principals, two of whom I hadn't really had extended conversations with before. I love finding out the ways they work to give all of our students the best education, and I wanted to hear the challenges they face. Each of them put up with a lot of questions from me. I came in with a lot of questions, and they answered them honestly and thoughtfully, and I have every confidence that each of them leads a staff that gives our students their best every day. Just to give an idea of when I visited during class time and a classroom passing period. I specifically asked each principal to take me to the busiest hallway in the school during a passing period so I could compare those three spaces. With all of that said, my visits to these three schools confirmed the information that district administration has presented to us regarding the student population at West Middle. The differences that I saw between these schools, specifically West Middle and Southwest Middle, because these are the two who would be affected population-wise, were stark and striking. And I think they reinforce a serious inequity in both opportunity and in experience for the students at West Middle due to its facility size and design. While West Middle is overcrowded, Southwest Middle is actually what I would consider an underused resource, with space for many more students than it currently holds. In fact, Southwest Middle was designed for 3 teams of students at each grade level, and it currently only has 2 teams per grade level, indicating that there's definitely room to take on more students in that school. Some of the specifics that I wrote down have already been mentioned, so I'm going to try not to repeat myself. I think the man who teaches in room 2211 is actually in this room. Am I correct? That's what I thought. It's the backstage area of the stage in the cafeteria, and it's really, really small. This year, 2 periods of band classes take place in the cafeteria at West. This cuts into the instructional time that students need to get and put away instruments from the band room. Just to make sure that this is not a COVID issue, I verified it both with Dr. Miller and with the band teacher, that the band teacher verified that she's began teaching in the cafeteria at least 3 years ago. This has been going on pre-COVID. I saw the classroom that was essentially an open bay that was made into a classroom with bookshelves. The specials are so crowded. I saw an engineering class with 29 students in it. I heard today it might have 30 now. a Hvac class with 27 and an art class with 26. I did not see this in the other schools. According to Dr. Miller and the other two middle school principal, the core classes are slightly larger at West, and the student-teacher ratio numbers that we've been provided reflect that. The PE situation has been discussed, as has been the lunch situation. I also have concerns the fact that the tables for lunch in the gym are just out in the hallway, and extra staff from outside the school has been brought in to move them. This isn't efficient. It just isn't. Let's see. We talked about the fact that the opportunity for students to take the electives they want is limited. You can't just say, let's hire more teachers so kids can get in their first and second choice classes, because there's literally no place to put them. They're running at full capacity. This is an inequity of opportunity for students at West Middle. At Southwest, just to give a contrast, Mr. McPherson said they've spread out to fill the available space. I saw an English class that actually is in 2 classrooms right now that normally has a divider in between it, and they're using those 2 classrooms because it gives them room to spread out. I saw a science classroom that's being used as a math room because it's a nicer space and that it wasn't used as a science classroom. Let's see. The population at Southwest Middle's actually gone down over the past few years, and before that it was still well below its capacity. Students get their first or second choice classes because elective classes are not running at full capacity. The hallways. I took pictures in the hallways too. At West, it's crowded, there are bottlenecks. I asked Dr. Miller if there had been injuries in the stairs, and her response were not severe ones. What does that say? There have been injuries in the staircase, and I don't find that acceptable. I also, regarding the idea of directing student outdoors for class changes in order to relieve pressure in the hallways, we're not doing that at any of our other schools. I think that's a safety issue and it's a staffing issue. Southwest, of course, there are design advantages. They've got wider hallways, indicating the school can handle more students. What we've done at this point is we've taken the school that's probably the worst design for contemporary teaching and stuffed it to the gills, when we have another school that has plenty of space. The schools are generally staffed the same as far as it's a staffing issue. Instructional coaches, reading specialists, same number of people dealing with a lot more kids at one school. There are support staff positions that have been converted to other positions to do things like help in the library at West because the librarian has too much to do with the number of students. Another issue I found striking was the special education issue. Special education students at West Middle School are not necessarily getting their services in appropriate areas. They should not be in the library. They should not be in those bays that are opening onto the hallways. At the other schools, there are classrooms where the doors can be closed for small group interventions. West Middle does not have that. It's not available. And then as far as just the other spaces available in the schools, at Southwest and South, they both have copy rooms and work rooms. That doesn't exist at West because it's been changed to classroom space. Both Southwest and South have sensory or calming rooms, one of which is also used for in-school suspension. It's a space for students to go to when they're perhaps overwhelmed, and they can be supervised, and they can calm down and get ready to learn again with staff help. West Middle does not have a space like that because all available space has been converted to offices or classroom space. There essentially aren't teaming rooms for meetings at West. whereas both Southwest and South have plenty of them. Southwest also has that great commons room, which is not the big commons where the cafeteria is. This is a separate room where an entire team can meet at once. An entire team of, well, pre-COVID. In theory, an entire team could meet there. I know I've gone on and on, but I'm going to summarize now. The number of students at West creates inequity for both students and staff at the school as compared to other schools. Students have larger, more crowded classes, sometimes in spaces that were never meant to be classrooms. They have reduced opportunity to get the electives preferred, inferior facilities for one-on-one work and special needs, because offices and other spaces have been converted to classroom space, and crowded hallways that prevent safety issues and create anxiety for students and staff. Staff at West Middle have higher workloads due to larger classes and the inability to add more teachers because the school is out of room. They also don't have spaces for teamwork and special programs that the other schools do. For several years, the district and West staff has made it work when it comes to the space in that school. Converting spaces from their original use, making little changes such as staggering class release times and directing students outside during class change. In my opinion, these kinds of changes are unfair and inequitable for West students and staff, especially when the district has other facilities, such as Southwest Middle, that are currently not used to their full capacity or potential.
Thank you, Pam. Christy?
I'm going to be fairly brief. The way I process information, I tend to take a lot of information and whittle it down. So please understand that my brevity isn't due to lack of serious consideration of the issues and asking a lot of questions and visiting all three schools. And I echo my thanks to the principals for the time they took and the patience to let us see for ourselves what we're dealing with and what the numbers and what the stories that we heard meant. You know, the bottom line to me is that there's too many students in West Middle. And we have let that problem persist. And, you know, I have to say that after leaving West Middle, I felt tremendous guilt that we had let it get to this point. And that we have, well, I appreciate the amount of effort we've put into piecemealing together solutions to make it work. And the way that staff has put their heads together to figure it out, and Dr. Miller has put her soul into figuring it out. You know, we split rooms, your classroom, you know, all these other things. And despite all that, every class is at capacity. We have no room to add sections. We have kids traveling outside. And yes, I could see a place where some analysis of space and flow could be helpful, but I don't think it's gonna make the level of change that we need to make the building function well and serve kids well. And seeing it just made that really clear, that it's time to stop piecemealing and it's time to think about what's a bigger, longer term solution so that we can serve all of our students equitably in the district. And then the teacher survey, you know, also just furthered that. You know, I want to assure people we saw all 93 responses, and what was presented was not swayed tonight. You know, we didn't pick out the good things and leave out the bad. Like that, what the teacher survey was very clear. That teachers feel very strongly, and they're the ones with these kids in these buildings all day that we trust with our kids' education, and they're asking for help. I have had a couple of teachers, you know, have separate conversations with them, and that is what they say. You know, we need help, we need relief. And it comes down to an equity issue for me. And, you know, Pam, you alluded to this a little bit, but one of the things that really, really got me was where SSD interventions are taking place in this school. And it's just not okay. And I think too many times in our society, we just expect people to take what they're given and say it's good enough, and it is not. And if you look from an equity perspective, each one of these kids deserves dignity and full services. They deserve better in terms of where they receive their interventions, and our teachers that are SSD teachers deserve to be able to provide services to students in a room that accommodates them and in a space that accommodates them, not open in the hallway. So I think we need to keep that in mind. let's see. So what to do? You know, I mentioned earlier that I struggle with any solution that involves spending taxpayer resources to build or remodel or, you know, any of that when we have space, that not only adequate space to be used, but space that would provide better educational experiences for our kids if they had more students. So, you know, I think I'll just wrap up there, that to me it really is about educational equity for all of our kids and making sure that we as a district are giving those same opportunities to every student. And again, I'll just wrap up thinking specifically about the kids that need a little extra and how do we make sure that we're able to serve them well.
All I could do is echo what everyone has said. I think Dr. Miller gave my report, basically. So as the other board members as well. But I just want to highlight a few things. When it comes to, you know, a large school such as West Middle, it is really difficult for a principal to manage, you know, a large staff and also to get to know students. I think it's critically important for the principal to really know their staff well, to get in and out of their classrooms frequently, have contact with them frequently. And I also think it's so important that the principal gets to know every student by name and gets to know every student in terms of their needs and their feelings as much as possible. And in a large school, that's very, very difficult. And then the assistant principals working with, for example, in 6th grade, 385 students. Could you imagine trying to get to know 385 students well and providing for their needs? 7th grade, 375 students, and 8th grade, 374. And it's extremely difficult. Assistant principals really want to get to know their students, and I know they make every effort to do that. But it's all the more difficult when you have those large numbers. You know, and I certainly think they don't want to turn them away, but at the same time, you know, if they had fewer students, as they do in the other two schools, it does make a significant difference. The same thing goes for the counseling staff. Counselors are working with students and their social emotional needs. Middle school students have a lot of needs, and sometimes they go undetected because they don't really get to know their counselor or their assistant principal or even their teacher, and their needs just continue to go on unattended. And I think in a smaller school environment, you have that opportunity to touch base with students and say, you may not have a concern or problem, but let's talk. You know, let's just have a chance to visit. And a lot comes out just through that opportunity. The school nurse, having been a middle school principal, kids are in and out of the school nurse's office continuously. They have all kinds of ailments, and many of them are not ailments, but they think they have them. And that's continuous. But with a school of 1,052 students, you could imagine what the nurse deals with every single day. The special school district staff, and I echo what was said before, I think it's appalling to have special ed teachers working with students in the hallways and in areas where they're exposed to the rest of the student body. These kids are sensitive about their needs as it is, and when they see their friends and other students seeing them with their special ed teacher, I think that's a negative that shouldn't take place. It's really inappropriate. One positive thing is the Hard of Hearing does have a definite classroom, which is great. The librarian, likewise, like the nurse, works with all students. Physical education, you know, there is a main gym and there is a small gym. The small gym is not available all the time because during lunchtime it is used for lunch, for setting up and taking down. So that takes up a lot of the time of the small gym facility. Phys ed, you know, with the number of teachers and the number of students, there's just not enough for students to have opportunities that other students would have in a smaller school. Music, arts, and practical arts, the environment, the facilities are adequate, but they don't meet the needs of all the students, primarily because the students do not have an opportunity to have their first choice or even their second choice. And that shouldn't take place. That's just not appropriate. West Middle was built in the early 70s, as Dr. Miller mentioned. It was an open space school, but soon after, within 3 or 4 or 5 years, the building was closed. All the classrooms were closed, and basically reduced some of the space in those classrooms, which made them smaller. And now we have classes at capacity, you know, well beyond capacity. You walk into a room and you're just kind of overwhelmed by the number of students in those classrooms, which doesn't allow much flexibility at all for teachers to have any kind of instructional program that's flexible or meets the needs of students and working with small groups as such. So that in itself is an issue. Then there's the issue with the load that teachers have. When you fill a classroom 6 times a day, 7 times a day with the number of classes teachers have, that's that many more students that they would have compared to another school where the classes are not quite full. You know, there may be 18 in a class rather than 25 or 26. So the teacher load is unbelievable, and that's inappropriate, and that shouldn't go on for long. Passing time is truly an issue. I recognize it at West Middle because I lived with it for a long time. It's not a building that students can come and go very easily in large groups. Coming out of those well area classrooms, when the bell rings, the students are flying out of those classrooms, just almost meeting face to face. Then, of course, in the stairwells and the small, narrow hallways that do exist in the building as well are an issue. The stairwells have always been an issue and a concern, and it is a safety factor. And I know that they're supervised very carefully by the administration and the staff, and that does prevent a lot of issues, I know, but it is a problem. The end of the day, 32 buses. Could you imagine that? 32 buses. About 200 cars come in and out of the campus in the morning and the end of the day. And it requires so much supervision and so much close scrutiny to be sure that students are safe. And even adults are safe who are out and about among the buses as well. So that's a major concern. I just have to give credit to Dr. Miller and her staff. They've done an outstanding job of making a very difficult situation work as well as it possibly can. And they're complimented for that. When I went to visit the building, it brought a lot of memories to me. And even at the time I was there, we had more students, and it was difficult at that time. And it's a shame that we're still dealing with a situation at West Middle that needs to be remediated and changed, and given the opportunity to be the size of a school, a normal middle school. So that's all I have to say about West Middle, but South Middle is quite different from the standpoint that it's a different building for one thing. The long hallways provide the opportunity for classes to be assigned by grade level. So you can have a 7th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade assignment of part of the building. Once again, the smaller number of students, it's easier for Dr. McQuarrie to manage the school and manage working with the staff and the students as well. The assistant principals have less students, and giving them the opportunity to get to know the students well and to provide for their needs. Likewise for counselors as such. And the classrooms vary in enrollment. Maybe some of them are capacity, but others are not, which gives a lot of flexibility. Special ed and resource teachers basically have their own space to work with their students, which is fantastic. That should happen. Students are given the opportunity for their choices of electives, I think most of the time, I would think. Hallways are open. Hallways are large enough for passing time. I watched passing time, and it just flowed very, very smoothly, very nicely. teachers and all were out in the classroom observing students and supervising. Fine arts, practical arts classrooms are a good size to facilitate the programs. The cafeteria is spacious and very nice. Students basically can eat with their fellow students. Physical education facilities are spacious, and there is ample outdoor fields for the program. With the number of buses and all at South Middle, it's certainly not the issue that it is at West Middle. Once again, the administration, the staff at South Middle are doing an outstanding job, and you could feel the climate of the school being relaxed and positive, and it's just a good feel. And I think it's going very well, and I think the size of the school and the commitment of the administration and the staff make it work very well. Southwest Middle is outstanding in many ways. I mean, it's comparable to other schools as well, but that building is a building that I consider ideal for a middle school. It's spacious, it's attractive. You can't go anywhere and not look out a window and see trees and see nature, basically. It's not closed in, and that's such a great feature about the building. Basically, it's 25 years old, but it sure doesn't look like it at this point at all. But everything I would say about South Middle and Southwest Middle, they're different administration, they're different teachers, different students, different building, but they're just outstanding programs, and basically I think that's facilitated by just the smaller numbers overall. You don't have the pressure of where am I going to put this group, or where am I going to put this teacher, or where am I going to put this staff member. That is pressure that a school should not have, an administration should not have. And students shouldn't have to live in an environment like that when they can live in an environment where they feel that there's not the crowds around them that they feel every day.
Thank you, Sam. Next, we'll go to Kevin, and then after Kevin, Debbie.
I'll be brief at I believe my colleagues have described, what we've observed pretty well. All of us visited these schools, and I'll defer to a lot of their comments. But here's what I wanted to point out. I went and visited West, and I visited South West Middle, and I expected more of the conversation to be about space and about people and flow and everything else that we've talked about and seen in emails and everything else. But those subjects obviously were discussed. But the thing the teachers and the administrators kept talking about wasn't about the space. It was about the disservice that we're doing to our students by not having enough space. That kids weren't able to get into elective classes they wanted. Certain courses weren't able to do certain activities because there just wasn't enough resources. And to me, that was what was so compelling. It's not a capacity issue. Yes, we could continue to put more and more kids into West Middle, but at the end of the day, we're not running a subway station. We're educating kids, and it's about the experience, not just how many of them we can have in the building. And I think a lot of the kids at West Middle perhaps don't realize it because they don't have any frame of reference, because this is the only school that they've known in a middle school setting. But they're missing out. They're missing out on opportunities. They're missing out on the opportunity to develop more one-on-one relationships with teachers and administrators. Are missing out on opportunities to pursue certain courses and electives, and they don't realize it necessarily because, like I said, it's what they've always known. But we're doing them a disservice, and I don't know what the answer is, but I know that this is an issue before our board, and I don't think we're going to be doing our duty if we just preserve the status quo and leave this to another board to deal with down the road. Obviously, now we are tasked with this, and I think the first step in the analysis was determining, do we have an issue that needs to be addressed? And I think unequivocally we do. And what the solution is, we'll determine at a later date. But from where I say, certainly is a problem that needs to be addressed. Sorry, my iPad just alerted me that I'm down to 5% battery, so I think that might be my cue to pass it to Debbie.
Well, I certainly had similar observations. I took the opportunity, I wanted to make sure that I was looking at apples to apples, so I attended all of the middle schools at the same time of day so that I could make sure that what I was seeing at one school was what was happening at another school at the exact same time. So I went from like 9:30 in the morning so that I could see the first parts of the day, and then went through the entire school with all of the principals. And you know, I feel like this district has done a disservice. I mean, we're sitting here looking at a report from 2002 that talks about the exact same issues that we're talking about tonight, and I don't want to see this issue get kicked down the road any longer. It's a disservice to our students and our families if these issues are not addressed more promptly. And this is going to have to be a discussion that the board has with administration in the future, that we don't let problems like this fester for so long, because now here we are. And people ask the question, well, why now? Why are you talking about it now when we've been able to manage all along? Well, okay, we've been managing, but how well have we been managing? And after seeing the smaller schools, how organized their cafeteria time is. So for example, at Southwest Middle and South Middle School, as like at West, everybody has assigned seating, but at these two schools, the students go into the cafeteria and they sit at their assigned seat. And they wait, and they have established their table mates at the beginning of the year, and what table they will sit at, and they've committed to that for like maybe the first quarter or so, and then they may change that up over time. They come to their assigned seat with their table mates and gather there. Then the principals come in, make an announcement, and they do this by grade level. So all the 6th graders, all the 7th graders, all the 8th graders get their time to sit together. And then the principals are able to call up the students by table number. So tables 1 through 10 can now proceed through the line. And in a very organized fashion, the kids go into the food line. They don't have to stand and wait in line. They don't have big long lines to wait. The other kids are able to chat or read or do whatever they want to do or socialize at their table while they're waiting for their table to be called. I was so impressed with that system. It's just not possible at West Middle. Kids come down, they're in grades 6 through 8 combined together, so they don't get to have meal time with their class, with their grade levels. And they all come, they get into the line, they're paraded through the line, and then they go and they sit in their chairs. Some of them have to get to the gym, the small gym. And it just seems so chaotic to me at West Middle. And I thought, we could do better. We can do better than this. And I was disappointed to see, bothered by our administrators and custodial staff having to set up these long tables in the small gymnasium to accommodate the lunch, and then having PE time cut short by 15 minutes so that the lunch period could get set up. So, it's just, that really was concerning to me. I also am troubled by the special education classes without the privacy, and seeing some of the ways that students are being tutored or counseled in less than private areas. It is not acceptable, is what Dr. Sortino said. I think the Hannah Wood move to Southwest Middle School makes sense from a geographic standpoint. I think everybody's on board with that. That makes total sense. Why that wasn't done years and years ago, who knows, but here we are and we're gonna deal with that now. I think we should appreciate the proposal to keep the Piermont feeder pattern going to West High School. That was a huge message that our Piermont community asked of administration, and they delivered on that. And so that feeder pattern to West High will still happen for the Piermont students going to South Middle. Is it ideal that students from the middle school get split up into two different high schools? I'm confident that our South Middle School administration will be able to help those students make those transitions, and at the other high schools make those transitions very easily. Not every student goes through the same in life K through 12 school system. A lot of kids are shuffled around for various reasons, with parents traveling or their businesses taking them elsewhere, and they have to adapt. And so I kind of look at it that way too, that kids are adaptable. They've been managing, and I have every confidence in the world that they will be successful. And I think that we need to not keep delaying decisions like this for 20 years or more. That we need to do a better job at addressing these concerns and issues sooner. On that note, I will say that I'm still concerned that even if this proposal were to go through, that there's still an issue at West Middle with accommodating the number of students at lunchtime. Because from my estimation, it seems that they're trying to, right now, the cafeteria will serve 250, can seat around 250 students. And even with this change, we're going to have more than 250 students at any given time in the cafeteria. So I do have still some concerns that I think there could be some deeper analysis that looks into the flow of West Middle, or how better to accommodate the cafeteria. I mean, you got drama right there next to the cafeteria that's trying to teach as lunch is being served too. Does that make sense? Could something be done there? I don't know. So all that to say, I think that there still could be some additional studies done to help improve this school, which is very different from all of the more some of the newer schools. But all in all, I think we need to do a better job for our students, and I think this proposal, as it stands, is the most expeditious way to start making some changes right away. Anything else that we do is just going to continue to delay the problem. It's going to continue to delay the issue, and then it's going to snowball. It's going to get even worse. So as difficult as the decision it is, I think our administration has brought us right now as good a proposal as we can get. But I think we need to do continued work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I will just echo my fellow board members' comments about my visits to these schools. They have been largely the same. I was fortunate. I mentioned previously I've been a West Middle parent and West High parent, and so I got to spend a lot of time in West Middle. And I got to spend a lot of time there when their numbers were at their lowest. Even then, there were times that I felt it was a very crowded place. As Dr. Miller alluded to, concerts, parent-teacher nights, it doesn't function well as a building to move from classroom to classroom, especially when you only get 6 minutes with a teacher. Down to 3. But I will say that I commend Dr. Miller and her staff for making the most of the situation, and even previous administrations making the most of what they had to work with. We've definitely eked out as much usable space as we can out of that building. I know I want to talk about some of the things we've heard from the community with regard to the feeder pattern into Piermont specifically, and some of the other schools, but Piermont, we've heard the concern that some of the people coming from Piermont, the students, are coming from Baxter Acres and Glanty, and having to go to a school that's farther away from their neighborhood school. And that's something that we've identified through this process, not just that particular school, but we have some schools in the south area, some elementary schools where there's kids in a little bitty section that are going past one school to go to another. And these are things that this process has alerted us to, that we're going to continue this conversation, whether it's that specific situation or whether it's the Baxter Acres, Glanty folks, of which I used to be one. So we know that there are, as Debbie mentioned, we know there are things that still need to be improved regardless of what direction this proposal goes. So we are going to continue working on that. I want to share my experiences. As I said, my experiences in viewing these buildings were largely the same as my fellow board members. I was in your room when you were trying to teach. I don't know how many people crammed into that tiny little room, but there were lots of examples of that. And to several of the board members' comments, that just is not fair to the teacher, let alone the students. But from my perspective as a student, I wanted to talk about, and I mentioned this last spring, but as a student, I was a middle school student at Northeast Middle, which was, back then it was East. And Dr. Ciartino was in the building with me, not as a student. And that's where I first got to know him, in his office, not by my choice. But when I left there, it was in 1983. It was when there was a huge. It wasn't just Piermont and West Middle. It was the entire district. So I went to Northeast Middle with when I left there, 20 or 25% of my fellow students went to West High with me. About 20% went to South High. About 25 or so % went to Central, and the rest went to North. So we were very evenly split when we left that building. As I think back, from my perspective then and my perspective now, I don't recall ever having any qualms either way. And the one thing I did want to mention, and I don't think anybody brought it up tonight, was that I do appreciate in this proposal the phased-in approach that we're talking about doing, because back then it was starting 3 months from now, you're going to a different school. That's what my sister heard. So I continued on at Northeast Middle. She had to go to West Middle. We weren't in the same building for quite a number of years, but it was a very short, abrupt change, and so I was happy to see that we have some kind of phased-in approach. I have taken an opportunity to reach out to some of my peers from back then, people that I'm still in touch with, to get their perspective. I even called Dr. Watson a couple of weeks ago to get her perspective, because I know, I'm not going to give away her age, but I know that she was in a similar situation in this building as a student, and this building went to 2 different high schools. And she shared with me that her best friend went to West High and she went to South High. In all of the situations, all the conversations I've had with my fellow students from back then, who I'm still in contact with today, Everybody has nothing but positive things to say about their experience changing schools or having friends that went to different schools. I liken it to going from elementary to middle school. When I went to Mason Ridge and then I went to Northeast, and when I got to Northeast, I was like, I know like 50 of you, and there's a couple of hundred or even more that I don't know. And so I think obviously every student has that experience when they're either starting kindergarten or they're starting 6th grade or they're going to high school in some cases. And so I think that really, for me personally, that really helped me from a social standpoint. It gave me the ability to adapt to different situations as I got older, because I had that experience as a student, as a younger person, and I learned from that experience and how to apply it to real life. I'll tell you, as a parent, my kids started out at Piermont because we lived in Glanty, and after a couple of years, I don't think I've ever shared this with Dr. Marty, we literally changed schools because we were not happy with the administration in that building at the time. And we decided that we were going to move, and that's what we did. I understand that some people don't have that, can't always do that, but we moved a mile up the road and went to Henry and never looked back. Everything was fine. My daughter was in the Mosaics Academy at Piermont. We transitioned to Henry. She was in the Mosaics program there. It was seamless because we didn't know any better back then, but it was a great experience. She was in Mosaics Academy at West Middle, and everything was great there. I think those folks have always done a great job. But as a parent, I totally get the idea of you buy a house where you want because that's where you want to raise your kids. I did it. I went to school in Parkway. I wanted my kids to go to school in Parkway, and both my wife and I graduated from West, so we said, okay, we're going to be in West. And what did we do? We bought a house in Piermont because we knew we're going to end up at West High. And when the discussion came up this past spring about, hey, we don't know, we're not going to talk about the high school feeder pattern at this point, we're just focused on the middle school, I get that really scared a lot of people. Because I would have been exactly in those same shoes, having originally purchased my home in Piermont, and I and other board members and obviously the community voiced their opinions pretty quickly that, hey, this is why we bought our house here, because we want to graduate. We want our kids to graduate from a certain school. For me, it was because of legacy. It's because that's where I went. That's where I wanted my kids to go. I understand for some of you, you look at test scores, you look at culture, you look at course offerings and things like that. As I've responded to different people on behalf of the board, I've tried to take into consideration some of those things and express our desire to have an equal, a very equitable learning experience for all. Regardless of what school you're in, regardless if you're in the west area, the north area, the central area, the south area. All of our schools should have a similar feel, should have a similar culture. I understand that different parts of the district are different in their socioeconomic makeup and their diversity, but that's what makes them great. The diversity that we have in Parkway is some of the richest in the St. Louis area, and we should celebrate that. It brings me to, well, first I'll just say one thing about transportation. When I went to Northeast Middle School, I should have never went to Northeast Middle School because I was much closer to South Middle. We drove past South Middle some of the times, some of the bus routes, and the next closest school was West Middle. So I should have gone there second, but somehow I ended up at Northeast Middle. And back then, I remember leaving my house at Barrett Station in Manchester, driving south all the way to Darty Ferry, picking up kids, going all the way east over to Bope Road, and it was an hour bus ride to get to Northeast Middle from my house. I was literally the first one on and the last one off, and that kind of stunk. But all that to say, the whole equity portion of this discussion, where we're driving kids that live right there down the street from this building, we're driving them to West Middle while we're driving Hannah Woods kids past the nearest school for them. That's the thing that bugs me the most. Having lived through it as a kid and seeing the financial aspect of it, the time, the bus routes, the challenge of getting students, on time to a building that's farther away than one that they could be going to, that bugs me, which is an equity thing. And that's really what we've all kind of talked about through everything is equity, where things are fair and impartial for all of us, for all of our students. So the debate between West Middle size and South Middle size and Southwest Middle size, it all boils down to equity. What kind of class choices do we have for new students? The extracurricular activities that are available to students. If you're having a play and you have 1,000 kids trying to try out for the play versus 500 kids try out for the play, guess what your odds are? The nurse's office, Dr. Ciartino mentioned, I think you mentioned the nurse's office. If you've got one nurse, and we have one nurse in every building, you have one nurse that has 1,100 students and you have another nurse that has 500 students, and you have, let's say you have and I've seen this happen, you have a group of students that discover a hornet's nest on the playground. It happened when I was a kid. And all of a sudden you have 20 kids that need medical attention right away. Or even if you need 5, you're splitting that nurse, and it's an equity issue. Same with the librarian, same with the SRO, who's charged with keeping kids safe, keeping traffic moving in and out of the buildings, same with the counselor staff, the administrative staff. They all have the same issue. They're trying to serve a different number of students. And from a teacher's standpoint, we're paying the same amount of money to a teacher that's in this building as we are a teacher that's in a building that has more students, and that's not fair. I think in closing, I think everybody has shared their experiences in the buildings and their perspectives on this matter. We still have some work to do. We still have some things to evaluate. We do take this seriously. As Pam said, we take an oath of impartiality. We take it seriously, despite all my personal opinions about how things were when I was a kid or my kids were in the building. It doesn't matter, because I have to make a decision based on what's best for all students, whether those students are in this building, whether those students are 10 miles away in another building. We have to make decisions based on what is best for every student in every building equally. And Mr. Tandy talked about the policies and the guidelines which dictate how things should be fair and equitable in all classrooms, and we have things that are not aligning with that. So as we continue over the next month, we have a lot more things to think about. I appreciate the opportunity finally for board members to share their perspectives and their findings in visiting the schools. Many of you probably don't realize, but we cannot have a meeting of more than 3 of us. Anytime there's a meeting of 4 or more of us, we have to publish the meeting, we have to post details of the meeting, and that's why we schedule these meetings so far in advance. So we literally can't, even 4 of us, get together for coffee or anything and share this information. So this is truly the first opportunity we've had to have a conversation about it. And so I appreciate everybody's perspectives. I want to thank everybody here for their contributions, obviously administrators for your contributions, our principals who are here tonight, both in person and remotely, and for their insight and their willingness to have us in the building and show us around and share their perspectives and their challenges. Excuse me. Lastly, I want to thank our students, our parents, our family, our community. There have been lots and lots, yes, even you. There have been lots and lots of emails shared over the last 6, 7, 8 months, and we've read every one of them. Every single board member here has read every single one of them. If you sent an email and I responded, it was on behalf of the board. And again, it goes back to the can't have a meeting with 4 or more people. So you will see me respond to one individual person, and I always copy Ms. Stover, our board secretary, and she sees to it that that communication gets routed to all of the board members. And when a person, a parent responds to my initial response, I send that one, whether I respond to it or not, again, I will send that to Ms. Stover so she can see that message gets to the rest of the board. So the board is fully aware of all communications and in the concerns that are shared. We will continue to pour through that feedback. I don't know about the rest of the board, but I've got little labels when stuff comes in so that I can kind of categorize things, and I've been able to go back the last few months and reread perspectives of families because it is important. It's one of the most important things that we've had through all this is the feedback of the community. So thank you for your input, your ideas. We have asked a lot of the administration. Both citizens and the board have asked for lots of things that they didn't plan on evaluating last spring when this was first brought up, and we really appreciate all their time in doing that. So we will, as I said, we'll continue to evaluate this, but I think as it stands on the agenda next month, we're slated to consider it one last time and vote on it. We will, like I said, we'll continue to do our due diligence and evaluate everything and make a decision that we feel is in the best interest of all the students of the district. So with that said, get back to my script here. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn the regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you for attending.